Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the May 27th meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. At this time, I would ask, as we are waiting for one or two more members to join us, that we stand by. And with that, I believe we have been joined by everyone we are expecting this evening. Again, I would like to call this meeting to order. It's the Thursday, May 27th meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. What I would like to do is begin with a recognition of the members I'm joined by this evening. I'm joined by Councilors at Large Anna Levy and District D Councilor Giovanni Rodriguez. And in advance of Monday's National Day of Observation for the heroes that have sacrificed their lives and given all, I respectfully call for a moment of silence in recognition of Memorial Day and the ultimate sacrifices that these individuals and their families made on our behalf. Thank you. At this time, I would ask that we stand and pledge the allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, I thank you. Again, joined this evening by Councilor at Large Anna Levy and District D Councilor Giovanni Rodriguez. My name is Dave Abdu, and I am the District Councilor from District E. Quick overview of this evening's proceedings. I would start by noting that this evening is the first of 3 scheduled meetings of this body to consider Mayor Vasquez's FY22 budget. We will then again meet on Thursday. So we're meeting this evening. We'll meet 1 week from tonight on Thursday, June 3rd. We will then meet again on Monday, June 7th. If needed, we have set aside Wednesday, June 9th and Thursday, June 10th, should those meetings be required, should this meeting go long, any one of these meetings go long, or we not get to any material. And with that, I would note that all the budget and finance meetings will be virtual in nature, and they will all begin at 7 p.m. At the conclusion of each budget meeting, we will recess the meeting. We will not adjourn, and it will be continued at the following meeting as scheduled. Again, all meetings begin at 7. They will be virtual, and the meetings can be found on the City Council landing page of the city website, as well as the City Council pages on YouTube and Facebook. Additionally, we may be viewed on Lawrence Cable Access Government Channel 22. Please see the agenda for further details. With respect to the agenda, I want to read the legal notice as provided in view of the COVID-19 restrictions that remain. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting laws, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 executive order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made and has been made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so at the following locations as outlined in our agenda: the City Council landing page at the city website, Facebook, and YouTube, where we do have channels. I would note that a special meeting of the City Council, the full City Council, has previously been ordered for the evening of Tuesday, June 22nd at 7 p.m. At that time, the public will have the opportunity to let its opinions be heard at the beginning of the meeting. I encourage interested citizens with opinions, questions, comments, and inputs to let their interests be known to their district councilor as well as their 3 city councilor at large anytime between this evening and June 22nd. You will be heard and your interests considered. All people wishing to be heard will have that opportunity in person or virtually at the meeting of June 22nd, when the council begins their full debate, consideration, and ultimately a vote on the outcomes of these 3 hearings that begin this evening. I would remind everyone that the city charter restricts the city council from adding content, policy, or any other sorts of changes to Mayor Kendris Vasquez's proposal before us this evening and again on the 2 following nights. On the evening of Tuesday, June 22nd, the city council will have only 3 choices: to accept the mayor's budget as proposed, to reject the mayor's budget proposal outright, or to cut money and cut service within lines within the budget. But again, the city council can only cut, it cannot add or change. Last but not least, I want to thank all of those department heads and representatives joining us this evening and for the following evenings. And on behalf of my colleagues, I want to particularly recognize those individuals that make these proceedings happen. First, I'd like to recognize our clerk, Maria Halloran, as well as Felix Garcia, who has helped us in the past and will help us again in the future. But Maria, thank you. Multimedia Director Extraordinaire John Mejia, who allows us this opportunity to be online, to be on TV, and get to our citizens during these times. I also want to thank our city clerk's office, with a special emphasis and thank you to Damaris Ruiz, who's here with us this evening, for her support, necessary support, leading up to this meeting and all of our budget activities that will go on throughout the month of June. And I would not do my job on behalf of my colleagues if we did not recognize the daily actions of Teresa Vega, who supports all of us on a daily basis and allowed us again to be here this evening and be prepared. So with that, let us begin. As we progress through tonight's agenda and each night's agenda, I would note that I'm going to exercise the privilege of the chair to take certain departments out of order, leaving the lengthier items towards the end of the meeting, respecting those department personnel and leaders joining us during the proceedings, and hopefully making these proceedings efficient for all. Therefore, this evening, I will be calling the following departments in the following order. I will ask Director Michael Miller of the airport. Then I will turn to the office of the mayor. Then I will ask Damaris Ruiz in the office of the clerk, followed by Vilma Martinez Dominguez, Office of Community Development, Pedro Soto and/or Sue Fink from the Office of Planning, and our city's CAFO, Mark Ianello, who will address all things finance, of which there are quite a few, and that section will conclude this evening's meeting. And I expect it to be a little lengthier than the preceding portions of the agenda. So I would ask each one of those individuals, I will call them and I will cite the page in the agenda, the annual budget book for those of you that have the book. And I know it doesn't show up on TV, but believe it, it's in my hand. I would ask that each individual called forward unmute themselves, identify themselves, their address, and the department that they will be representing, and then to present your budget and the comments that you feel appropriate to support your ask this evening of this committee and of the council on the whole. So with that, I would ask first, as I stated, that, well, actually, before I do, Mr. Ianello, before we get started, do you have any comments that you would like to provide the public and the councilors this evening before we ask for the first department to come forward?
Well, I think you can. I think I can hold my comments till I get my section. So I think it'd be appropriate, start with the departments, the smaller departments that you just mentioned, and I'll give an overview of the budget as when it gets to my section.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ianello. And I think I did pass you over. I want to thank you for your time before these meetings and helping me be organized to be able to conduct this evening's meeting. So thank you, sir. So with that, as previously mentioned, I would direct my colleagues to page 161 of our book and ask that Mr. Michael Miller present himself and tell us why we're here this evening to consider the airport portion of the budget. Mr. Miller.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and committee members. Mike Miller, Airport Director, residential address of 90 South Bowdoin Street. I'm here again this year asking your support of the budget as presented for the airport. We've presented a budget that we feel is solid and realistic based upon our revenues expectations, as well as our capital needs for operating the department. The only increases you'll see in that budget that is before you are those that are contractually necessary or that we have decided based upon years of experience between myself and the number 2 at the airport, Christine McSorley, will be absolutely necessary in the year going forward. So if you would like, for expediency's sake, I will go through the sections of the budget, starting with the personnel, and point out where there are increases and answer any questions that any of the committee members have. And at the end of it, I'm available for any questions that they may have after my presentation. So I know you've said to go to page 61, but the real heart of the budget, 161, thank you for correcting me, Mr. Chairman. The heart of the budget in terms of expenses comes on page 163. And if you start with personnel, first I should ask, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great.
All right, thank you. Personal services, you will see that there are increases in the salary and wages of $10,322. Those reflect contractual obligations that we have to meet. There's also an increase in overtime of $6,000, and that is because we have looked back at the years and saw that we're making some transfers as the year went along. So to better accurately reflect what our annual expense will be for overtime, we'd like to fund it at the appropriate level of $18,000 rather than the $12,000 that we had this year. There's a small bump up in the clothing allowance, and again, that's contractual. And that's where we have most of the increases in this year's budget and the personal services. If you look down at purchase of services and the object code 5210, you'll find a $1,500 increase in the repair and maintenance of buildings and grounds. The airport administration building is getting older. It's costing us more every year. Thankfully, we are in a program that MassDOT Aeronautics is administering to build administration buildings throughout the Commonwealth. And I've been told that we will be getting a new building. We'll be the last building within that program, but it's still a couple of years away, unfortunately. If you go down to the next category of our budget supplies, you'll see we level funded it. Then if you go to intergovernmental, you'll see there's a reduction. Those line items are beyond our control. They are given to us by the Comptroller's Office, and our reduction is due to a pension assessment reduction. Based on the salaries of the employees that we had last year. My understanding is it's taken as a snapshot from August, September timeframe and then carried forward for the next year's assessment. So going through the budget, our next category you'll find will be charges and expenses. Again, there's reductions in that department, primarily due to our health insurance selection. All the employees at the airport are covered under the city plans, but they are low cost plans as opposed to the year before. And then our capital outlay section is level funded, and the remainder of the budget's level funded. So I'm available to answer any questions that your committee may have and explain any of the line items.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I would open with a very strong presence with your background, your virtual background. So that's appreciated.
That's my favorite one.
It is awesome. Your budget is straightforward with the contractual obligations and the aging facility, which for any citizens that have not been there, I highly recommend it. Despite its age, it's well kept and a very good visit. With that, the chair has no questions at this time. I would turn to my colleagues and ask if any of my colleagues have questions of Mr. Miller. I don't see any questions. I'll entertain motions. All right. Therefore, Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Rodriguez, and I would also note we are joined this evening by Counselor at Large Pavel Payano. Mr. Rodriguez, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask a question on section and the intergovernmental. Can you detail a little more what that actually do for the APR?
Sure. The intergovernmental is two categories within it. Other assessments, which are a pension assessment, and those are determined by the retirement board and passed on to us so that we pay a cost for the employee's pension. So the airport covers all costs of its employees. And the second is the other intergovernmental was for taxes to the town of North Andover. We do, even though we are municipally owned, we do have to pay taxes at the tax rate that the airport was paying taxes on the land of the airport was paying prior to being converted to an airport. So if you look down in that line item, those are for taxes to the town of North Andover and miscellaneous fees, such as our dumpster fee that we have to pay for the Board of Health.
All right. So a dumpster and taxes to the town of North Andover.
Yes.
And other charges and expenses. Can you lay down the membership that the airport or members of the airports are part of?
I am a member of the Massachusetts Airport Management Association, which is a statewide organization of airport managers and airport aviation enthusiasts. It's represented by fixed-based operator or businesses on the airport. They are allowed to be members. Students in flight schools are allowed to be members. The consultant industry is a member. That's one of the memberships that we belong to. Also, there's an organization called the Association of American Aviation Executives, AAAE. We're a member of that as well.
And that's the $1,100. That's basically for.
Yes, for the two associations.
Is there all right, no more questions for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Are there other questions by other councilors? Hearing none, I would thank Mr. Miller for joining us this evening and wish you well, and we'll see you on Tuesday evening, June 22nd.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the rest of the committee members, thank you, and thank you for your support. The success we have there is a team effort between the Airport Commission, the airport staff, the City Council, and the Mayor's Office. So I want to thank everybody for their support of the airport. With that, I will be signing off.
Thanks, sir. All right, the next item I'd like to call this evening is the Office of the Mayor. Is there an individual from the Mayor's Office here this evening, or Mr. Iannello to represent the Mayor's budget, please?
I guess if there's someone from the mayor's office, they're welcome to speak, but I think I can speak a little bit to the mayor's budget. The mayor's budget, as you can see, begins on page 26 is the overall view of the mayor's budget. And then on page 27 is the detailed expenditures. So basically what he has is an increase in staff, which is on page 28, a breakdown of the staff. And he's requesting an increase from 5 positions to 6. Is looking for there's a lot of traffic going through the mayor's office, so he's looking for 4 administrative aides to the mayor, and then a chief of staff, and of course the mayor. So those are the personal services portion of the mayor's budget, requesting an additional administrative aide. So that's really the only increase to his budget. He tried to offset most of that increase by cutting a few of some of his other expenses. He decreased printing and mailing, and other purchase services. He decreased a total of $2,500. And then operating supplies, a few others are also lower. And dues and memberships, he reduced substantially That was a fee for the joining the Mass Municipal Auditor, Mass Municipal Association, which is pretty expensive. And so he's just looking to decrease that fee for this year. Let's see. That's pretty much his budget in a nutshell.
Thank you, Mr. Ryanello. I will not inquire. I won't put you on the spot and ask you for the texture of the increase in individual of the one individual as an aide. I will save that for, or maybe my colleagues will, but I'll save that for the June 22nd meeting when hopefully the mayor's office will be represented. All other expenditures and deductions, I have no further questions, so I would turn over to my colleagues. Are there questions by colleagues? Mr. Payano, sir.
Chair. Mr. Iannello, can you just guide me through this administrative aids to the mayor? It looks like it's 4 new positions. Is that correct?
I think they were called special assistants to the mayor in the last budget. So he's looking, the title is administrative aids to the mayor.
Right. So are any of these, are any of these positions ordinanced?
I believe that's the ordinance position. I think it's administrative aid to the mayor, not special assistant. I think that was the differential.
Okay. And then as far as the mayor's position, if I recall, is that so the mayor is ordinanced at that amount? Is that correct? So I remember there was like an increase or something that we did for the former mayor because he was there for 10 years or something like that. Is that, oh, it was on longevity. Is that still applying in this budget, or has that been removed?
I assume there's a longevity in this budget of $900. It was $1,800 last year. So I assume there's I'm not sure if there's which person in the mayor's office gets longevity. It might be, I don't have that in front of me, but obviously it decreased. There was longevity available for members of the mayor's staff. After they're here, I think 5 years, and then after 10 years, there's a different longevity number.
Right, but it sounds like this current mayor, Mayor Vasquez, it looks like he's going to be, I don't know if he's hiring 4 different people. Like I'm just wondering if that longevity still applies. Like why?
I don't have the listing of who's paying. Yeah, I don't have the listing of who's getting, who was in the budget of which individuals and their names equal to $900. But someone in the mayor's office or in the payroll department probably made that change from 1,800 down to 900 based on the existing staff. I just don't have that in front of me, but there probably is someone who is due a longevity pay.
Okay, so we think that there might be someone who's due a longevity pay. Is it possible that you could just inform
for the
us?
next meeting? I'll pull that up. Yep.
Perfect. I mean, because if there is, then great. But if there isn't, then I'm just wondering if that 900 still makes sense. And then, do you have any idea as to? So I guess what you're saying is that the reason that we're getting rid of special assistant to mayor is because that's not ordinance, and administrative aid to mayor is ordinanced.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's ordinance, but my memory seems to serve me. Yes, that's the correct title, administrative aid to the mayor,
Okay.
as opposed to special assistant. I just know that Mayor Vasquez was, when he put this budget together, he was looking for one more assistant because the mayor's office has a lot of traffic.
Okay, that makes sense. No, I think I want to make sure that whatever you know, our ordinances say that we can't sort of budget positions that aren't ordinanced. So if you're saying that administrative aid to the mayor is ordinance, and I feel like I remember reading that that does sound like one of the positions that's there. I think there was like maybe there was two types of different, or a few types of different administrative aids, and that's great. My next question is the amount or range that it's in the ordinance. Is that the same amount that's listed here?
That I don't know, but I can see if I can find out for the next
Perfect.
meeting. But remember, the salaries that are ordinanced are from 2005, so there's very few of those salaries are what we're actually paying at.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, but that also means that if we are budgeting one thing and our ordinances say something else, that means that the council needs to, go back to, obviously they're approving the budget, so they're approving a certain range. They need to go back to the ordinances and change that, because it's by
We're
approving
working
a
with
range or an amount that's not in the ordinance, we're violating our own policy.
That's right. And we've been doing that for years. So I met with, just a couple of weeks ago, met with Attorney Ruano to see if we can make sure all the ordinances are up to date. And I've asked the personnel director to start getting the correct or upgrading the not the pay scale, but it's called whatever it is in the ordinances that it's called, the salary schedule for the non-bargaining employees. So we're going to be at the council shortly trying to rectify all of that stuff. There are quite a few positions that are either or they're in the pay plan differently than they are in the ordinances. I don't know how that happened in 2005, but it doesn't make sense that we would have a salary schedule approved for a position that isn't ordinanced. I'm sure it probably was taken care of at the time. But maybe the ordinance is just when the ordinance change was made or the salary schedule was presented, for some reason those ordinance changes didn't make it to the ordinance book. So Attorney Ruano is taking a look at that. We're going to try and correct that in the next couple of months with the city council.
Great. I have no further questions. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Payano. Appreciate those questions. Are there other colleagues that wish to speak? Hearing no further comments or questions, thank you, Mr. Ianello, for representing the mayor's office. It is appreciated, and we will move on. The next item will be the office of the city clerk. And as I previously recognized, Damaris Ruiz is with us this evening, as well as Daniel Tabor. And I'm not sure who's presenting. Maybe it's you, Mr. Ianello, but I would ask that they come forward and present themselves and their budget.
Hello.
What was that department? Sorry.
I'm sorry, the office of the city clerk, and you can find it in your book on page 49. 49.
I'll just preface, I'll let Damaris speak. I'll just preface on page 49, you can see that this section includes the city clerk's office budget, the elections office, and then the vital statistics and annual listing.
Thank you, Mr. Ianello, and I suggest we cover all of them. And if those aren't necessarily in Clerk Ruiz's lane, if you would cover them, that would be great.
I think they're all in Damaris's lane. I'll just jump in if she needs any help.
Sounds good. Ms. Ruiz, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening. Damaris Ruiz, acting city clerk. Actually, I do need Mark's help with this. I've never done one of these before.
Right.
If you can help me out, that'll be great.
Well, as you can see, the overview of their budget is, and this budget was primarily brought forward from the former city clerk because he had the line items all delineated, and he's prepared this budget for probably 20 years or so. But anyway, when we asked department heads to level fund their budgets, obviously Damaris submitted a level funded budget in line with what the previous clerk submitted. So as you can see on page 50, which is a city clerk's office, You can see on page 50 is the overall detailed line items, and at page 51 is the detail of the positions within the clerk's office. So last year in the clerk's office, if you look at the total positions that were filled, there were 5 positions in this office, and this year there's still 5 positions. There's a couple of changes in the, there was a temporary salary paid of $25,000 last year, because I think that was in anticipation of providing help for the clerk when the clerk left before a new one came in. And then last year there was obviously we offset that temporary wage line item with the lost time factor of the assistant city clerk and the city clerk not being on the payroll. So this year those items are not necessary. The major change here is the change to the city clerk salary, which the council increased the clerk salary to $95,000. So you'll see that item in the budget. The assistant clerk position was level funded. And you can see the other positions in the department are pretty much the same as the prior year. A couple of adjustments to, you can see the vacation line item is decreased, and that was because I think the city clerk and the assistant city clerk probably had the ability to carry over vacation and purchase excess vacation time. And there's only one person who elected to do so far this year. Longevity has also been reduced again because the existing staff subject to longevity is less than what it was last year because of the clerk and the assistant clerk. They were both eligible for longevity. Other than that, the specific line items within the department, it's level funded to the same as last year, which is advertising. City clerk never knows what the advertising is going to be. It depends on how many public hearings have to be held and based on the activity of the city council. So that's a guess. Last year, in prior years, you can see in FY19, it was 11,474. Then it was increased. The actual expenditures are up to 16,891. And then so far through this year, it's only been $8,700. But we level funded that because we just don't know what to put in there. It depends on how many public hearings get published. I'm not sure if there's any outstanding. I'm sure there are some outstanding advertising invoices that the city clerk will have to pay, namely the advertising of the public hearing for the city budget. So there will be a lot more charged to that account before the fiscal year ends. Other than that, I really can't point to any line items that kind of stick out. I mean, they're pretty much the same as all the same as the prior year. Damaris, I'm not sure if you want to mention anything that I might have said or corroborate what I've said, but feel free to jump in.
No, I think
Okay,
you covered it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Then I guess I'll shift over to elections, and maybe Daniel wants us to jump in here. But again, the elections division is, I'm going to start with the page 53, which has the listing of all the positions in the elections department. And last year there were eight positions, including the 3 board of registrars, which aren't full-time employees. And then there's 8 this year that we're requesting. You can see all the salaries are pretty much level funded, except there's a principal account clerk salary in here. And there's one of the accounting clerks. There's an accounting only from 2 to 1 accounting clerk, but 1 principal account clerk. I'm not sure if that was an upgrade during the year or that was just something that was rolled into. All of them were rolled into, or both of them were rolled into accounting clerks last year. So I'm not exactly sure if it's a change in title or it was just a correction of a prior year, but it's approximately the same as the prior year. And then the bilingual coordinator has a slight increase. Again, you can see the vacation buyback is a little bit less than the prior year. Longevity seemed to be remain the same as the prior year, so it must be the same individuals. And then the interdepartmental payroll charge of $50,000. That's the same as the prior year, and that basically is for the police details assigned for both city elections. we usually budget, police department to have a budget of 25,000 per election to handle the police details. On the expenditure side for the elections department, again, you can see all the line items were level funded, with one exception. There is a professional services line item of 60,000, and we put that down to zero. That was put in the budget, I believe, for last year by the former city clerk in case there were any lawsuits related to I don't know if it was redistricting or redistricting or the census or whatnot, but he always wanted to put money in a budget in case there was a challenge to any of the elections. We talked to the city attorney about this, and if there's a challenge to the elections, her office will partake in it, and if we need to hire outside counsel, she has money in her budget perhaps to do it, and if not, we'll seek funding elsewhere. So I think that's it for the elections budget. I did want to just mention, I think, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we had have to budget for 3 elections. There's only 2 elections, a primary and the general election this year. And then the annual listing and vital statistics portion of the page is on 54. And again, there was a data processing charge. I believe that's the anticipated increase in I think it's LHA, who handles all our who does all the printing of the annual listings and the reports that have to get out to the residents. And of course, printing and mailing is back to was 21,000. We reduced it to 15,000, which we think is enough to get through based on history so far of the prior 3 years. And that's about it for the city clerk elections and annual listing budget.
Thank you, Mr. Iannello. Thank you, Ms. Ruiz. Much appreciated. Pretty straightforward. I see the 1-for-1 on the personnel. I only have one question before I turn it over to my colleagues, and that is with respect to the line and advertising. Anecdotally, it seems that we are advertising more and more public hearings and public meetings, and with COVID now hopefully getting in the rearview mirror, is it felt that this is sufficient for the amount of advertising we will do in fiscal year 22? It seems, or at least it did seem in 19 and 20, that at times advertising was a bit of a struggle. And I don't know if that was necessarily budget related, but I'll stop there and ask, is this going to be enough for what needs to be done in the next 12 months?
Well, just looking at the in the clerk's budget, the printing and mailing are the advertising line item, which is for the public hearings. In 19, we spent 11,000. In 20, we spent 16,800. And so far in 21, we've only spent $8,700. So the 20,000 that was budgeted in FY21 looks like it's holding up, unless there's a lot of public hearing invoices they haven't paid. But I believe we're 20,000 seem to be. We just level funded 22, the same as 21. And so if 20,000 gets us through in 21, we should be okay for 22. But it is, as I said, it's kind of a crapshoot. We just don't know how many public hearings will need to be advertised, but it looks like 20,000 seems to be appropriate.
So let me ask you this procedurally, Mr. Iannello. If come the end of FY22, either Q3 or Q4, clerk comes to you and says, I'm zeroed out, is that something that is automatic, or is that a budget consideration? Is it like snow and ice, I guess I should say?
No, well, in other words, obviously we have to advertise, but the former clerk would come to me towards the end of the year if he saw his advertising was short. And sometimes I'd be able to look at his accounts and let him know, well, you got a purchase order that's encumbered. So if you just spend down that purchase order, you'll make it through the year. Another time I know we have other line items in the budget with printing and mailing. I have in the budget and finance division or the CAFO division, I have the purchasing department who does a lot of advertising. And I have the city treasurer who does a lot of advertising when it's time for putting liens on properties and things like that are required. So I know in the past, it was probably a couple of years ago, he had a few invoices that he couldn't pay. And instead of going to the council asking for a transfer, I was able to take those bills and we paid them for him. I think I paid him out of the purchasing budget. I think she had a few extra bucks in the purchasing department that year. But we were able to manage, but he does come at the end of the year, and worst that would happen is we'd have to come back to the council, ask for additional appropriation. But it's just his amounts are so small, we generally can find it within departments' budgets. If it's not within his own, we go outside. But most years I can find it within his own operating budget.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the answer. With that, I would turn the floor over to my colleagues for their questions or concerns. Councilor Levy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To you. What about the clothing or uniform allowance? What is that?
Oh, that's a per union contract. The clerical union gets an amount for each. I think it's $300 or it's $250 or $300 for each person in the clerical union. They collectively bargain for that.
So my other question is regarding, so we have been without a city clerk for almost 6 months right now. So we haven't saved a lot of money. What we do with that?
Well, I believe we used it to hire a temporary, a former town clerk, I think is assisting. So I know we used the salary for that. Also, I believe Eileen Burnell was taking on some of those activities. So some of the pay was used for that. So I'm not sure if I don't have their expenditures in front of me right now, but looking at I guess if I look at page 52, if you take a look at page 52, and look at the FY21 actual through May 11th column, you'll see for permanent salaries, there's $94,599 expended through that date. And the approved budget last year is $167,000. So there definitely looks like there's going to be some excess salaries, which will be turned back to the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Levy.
Thank
Are
you.
there further questions of Mr. Iannello or Ms. Ruiz? Hearing none, I want to thank Ms. Ruiz and Mr. Iannello, and I know Mr. Tavora is here as well. I want to thank you for being here this evening and representing your budget. And we'll see you on June 22nd. Thank you. Next, I would ask that the Office of Community Development, Ms. Vilma Martinez Dominguez, come forward, identify herself and her address for the record, and present her budget, again, which is the Office of Community Development. And for my colleagues, I would note that her budget can be found on page 55 of your book.
Good evening, councilors. Great to be here tonight presenting the budget for FY22. My name is Vilma Martinez Dominguez. I live on 71 East Pleasant Street in Lawrence. So our budget is pretty much level funded to at $150,278. There's just some minor changes in the line items related to purchase of services and supplies. As far as personnel services is concerned, same as I mentioned, budget is it's level funding. So it's homelessness prevention. The homelessness initiatives coordinator, her salary is $60,000 annually. So the general fund supports half of this position at $30,000, and then the remainder of that position is funded through other grant funds. The other position that's funded is the community health specialist, and staff, it's paid $40,000 annually. Again, the general fund supports this with at $35,000, and then the remainder again it's using other grant funds. And then myself and the manager of financial and administrative services, which is Susan Fink, we're funded for a portion of our annual salary, because there are grants that there's non-grant eligible work that we need to perform that cannot be supported with what the grants that we receive. So for instance, the supervision of the homelessness initiatives coordinator and other members of that team, the community health specialist, and anything that has to do with homelessness efforts, attendance at meetings and other things. Purchase of services, there's $8,683 for a share of the annual lease for the community development space. There was an increase, a slight increase. The 3-year lease renewal, it happened this year. It's happening fiscal year 22. And there's a difference of $633 in that. $823, it's a share of the custodial services cost for the community development department space, which is about $4,872 per year. As far as supplies is concerned, this is just basically copy paper, you know, workroom supplies, things like that, that we utilize those the line item for. And we needed to decrease that line item this year in order to accommodate the increase in the lease costs. And then we did the same thing for in-state travel costs for non-grant related meetings, particularly those related to homelessness. We also needed to decrease that line item to accommodate the increase in the lease costs. So that's basically our budget. There's not much more to share, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martinez Dominguez. I do not believe I have any questions at this time. So I would ask my colleagues if they have questions or concerns. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question on regard to the purchase and services. And this is the rental of equipment and spaces. And a space, basically,
What page?
page 56. And this is the subject line 5272, the purchase of services. I mean, I don't know if this bill is split between every department that is there, or this is the total amount that the city pays for that space where you guys are, the building. I know that, and this part of the budget is 8,683. This is a portion of the actual rental of the building, and how they are split between departments.
So the lease, I'm gonna let Sue speak up on that one.
Good evening, councilors. Sue Fink, Community Development Department. I live at 6 Rockwood Lane in Lawrence. The way we split up the lease cost is we do a proportionate share based on the number of employees within each division.
Okay, and how much is the total cost for the building rental? Because I mean, we're gonna have to figure it out between employees, how many employees we have in total.
I don't have that right in front of me, unfortunately.
We'll be happy to share that information with you, Councilor Rodriguez.
So essentially we have, on this department, we have total amount of employee of, so 4.33. So the $8,000 represent the 4.33 employees for this department?
Correct.
Okay. And that's as well as the custodial services contract? Same thing?
That's split in the same way.
The same way. I would like to know like the total cost for the entire building. I mean, should be fairly easy from the building perspective. I mean, the lease. So can you give me that information Can you send it to me by email?
Absolutely.
All right, can you share as well with the other members of this board?
Yes.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Are there further questions? Mr. Payano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Vilma and Sue, for being here tonight. Just a quick question, well, two quick questions. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the receptionist? I see that it's essentially, I think it's splitting time between different departments. Can you just talk to us about like what the need is and how this is different from before? Because I think in the past, I do recall when I've been to the office, I've seen somebody there. So I'm just trying to figure out what's new.
So I'll be happy to start, and then Sue can fill in and other department heads. So basically, when we live, because I feel like we live at work, when we're at the Haverhill Street location, that building belonged to the city. So there was no other cost. When we had to move from there, the lease was up. I mean, not the lease was up, but when we moved over to the new location on Essex Street, there was a cost related to the lease. There was a cost related to the lease, and it cost, and Sue can just corroborate with this. There was a cost related to the lease, and we had to let go one of that position. That position was actually laid off and eliminated. What ended up happening was the Business and Economic Development department actually had an administrative assistant that between that person and the administrative assistant from Community Development were able to cover that position. Fast forward to where we're at now, and the volume of development that's happening and the volume of inquiries that are happening that we're experiencing in our office, really not having a receptionist there impacts our ability to really truly do our job. It's sometimes you have, inspection, our field supervisors there, the inspection, the people that do the lead grant, our staff is there. So
Oh, I think we lost her.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll pick up. So basically, most of the staff has been pitching in and taking various shifts to cover the front desk. So the administrative assistants can actually do the tasks that they're assigned to in supporting the directors of their respective departments. So we're looking to hire a receptionist, and the cost would be split 3 ways between community development, planning, and business and economic development. Community development will support our third of this person out of our grant funds. So it does not appear in the general fund for our division.
That makes sense. So essentially, what I'm hearing is it was the position that used to be there a few years ago. There's been more demand of people calling in, coming in, and more requests for services from the planning department, and this is to bring back that position to free up the time for others. Would I have it right? Okay, great. The other piece is for the administrative assistant to boards. I see that there was an increase in amount. Is that something that's contractual?
that would be a question for the planning director.
Now, Counselor, I think you're on page 60.
Yes.
That's the planning department.
Got it. Okay.
Vilma's page 56.
Okay. Move forward. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Payano. Thank you, Ms. Fink and Ms. Martinez-Dominguez, and it's good to have you back. Ms. Fink filled in admirably in your absence. Seamless. Are there other questions or concerns by fellow councilors? Hearing none, I want to thank Ms. Martinez-Dominguez and Ms. Fink for joining us this evening, and we will see you on the 22nd of June.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you too. The next item will be the planning department. I would point out to my colleagues that can be found on page 58. And this evening, it will be represented by its director, Mr. Pedro Soto. Mr. Soto is with us this evening. I would ask you, Mr. Soto, to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and give your address for the record, and tell us about your budget and why we should consider it favorably.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Good evening, Counselors. My name is Pedro Soto, Planning Director. For the record, my address is 177 Washington Street in Lynn. And I'm before you tonight to present the budget on behalf of the Planning Department and answer any questions that you may have. Just want to point out that our budget is $354,993, and this represents an increase of $41,449. Two noteworthy changes. The first is in the category of personnel services. In salaries and wages, there's a change of $14,987, and in purchase of services, other purchase services, $24,461. The first change in personnel services, the biggest cost or change there was $12,488, which I believe was covered in our last section with community development. That represents 1/3 of the cost of the receptionist role that was discussed moments ago. And in other purchase services, the $24,461, that was a change that I discussed with Mayor Vasquez. And this is, throughout the year, we in the planning department and economic development as well, and working with that department, there are studies or grants that we need to apply for, and we do work with third-party consultants to help us get those funding sources into the city. So that funding source represents third-party consultants that we hope to work with just to aid us in our efforts in the planning department. Those are the two biggest changes that I'd note. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Just one more time, could you just walk us through the personnel bump of $14,987 to include the receptionist, just doing the math along the way? I'll let you talk. I could read it, but I'll let you talk.
Yes, absolutely. So I only highlighted the receptionist role, that's $12,488, and that represents 1/3 of the cost to bring that person on. So this, as was discussed moments ago, this particular role will help administer kind of the workload as clients come in, as the public comes in to interface with economic development, planning department, community development. This person would work with them to understand what their needs are and direct them accordingly. So we felt that it'd be reasonable to split the cost among the three departments. There are some other changes, like there is a reduction in the asset officer role. The salary for fiscal year 21 was $55,212, and there was a change in that role. Former staffer left, and we brought someone that was experienced, but maybe less years of experience, and they started out at a lower, on the lower scale of that pay scale. And the administrative, I know that Councilor Payano had a question earlier about the administrative assistant to the boards, what the increase represents. The fiscal year 21 budget does have a $40,154. And that was actually contractual, where he started off, this individual would start off at that lower rate. And then after good performance, after 6 months, it would be bumped up to $45,173. That individual met all those benchmarks and is doing a great job in the department. So that's what that change represents. We also have a stipend. I have a stipend for fiscal year 21 of $5,000 and fiscal year 22 of $7,500. And there was one reduction in longevity. There's only one individual in the department that qualifies for longevity. So that's what, there was one additional person that left the department. That's why that reduction is there. And that completes the $14,087.
Thank you. If I could, I'd like to drill down just a little bit on the stipend and the administrative assistant to the boards. The stipend, stipend increase, is that shared amongst people, or what is the $2,500 increase represent?
That particular stipend is actually for my role. There's a few, you know, as you can imagine, with the increase of the workload that we're working with in economic development, planning, we've had gaps in services. So a lot of those, in particular, grants. So writing up grants, securing new funding sources. This was something that it did not fall under the purview of planning per se. And I did work with former Mayor Rivera to kind of look at, well, what are the things in the department in economic development kind of across OPD that are missing? What are the tasks that need to get done that is not falling on anyone's plate at the moment? If you recall, you know, I started at the beginning of February in 2020, and maybe 6-8 weeks later, we were in a pandemic. So a lot of the efforts in economic development were really geared towards assistance of small businesses, helping businesses understand the federal and state programs that were coming online to help support their businesses. So I'd say maybe 70% of our efforts were geared towards that. And we still had grants that we had to administer. We still had funding cycles that were opening up, mainly for Tomborello and Merrimack Paper, and even MassWorks that were coming online. So those were programs that didn't necessarily fall in planning per se. That was traditionally done by economic development, but because we needed the assistance to get those monies in the door, those were tasks that I took on that were just kind of, they weren't being taken care of. And I did take those on. And that was a stipend that the mayor's office felt was good compensation, a reasonable compensation, I should say, for the additional work that went above and beyond my job description.
Thank you for that detailed description. I have no further question or comment regarding that item. I do regarding the administrative assistant to the boards, but I want to defer to my colleague, Mr. Payano, and ask him if he would at this time to ask his questions and address that item. Mr. Payano, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, so I do have some questions on the administrative assistant to boards. I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about the position. And then I have some questions on the finances itself. So can you just tell us just high level, what does this position do?
I think this position is really critical to what we do in the planning department. So, you know, a lot of the efforts are ushered through various committees, planning, you know, we have the ZBA, the planning board, all the administrative tasks, you know, from the moment a proponent comes in to submit to the city, our administrative assistant is reviewing all the plans, making sure that they're complete, making sure that they're answering any questions that the proponent may have. Then they have to go through the process of, you know, submitting, advertise that particular project, answer any questions that constituents may have. So it really comes down to going from point A to point Z, just ushering that project through the process, through the approval process, communicating with all the board members, answering any questions that they may have prior to any board meetings. So it's a really critical administrative role that our team is playing on that. There's, you know, I think there's room in all job descriptions in our department to support in any other way. So I think, I'm not remembering the exact terminology, but, you know, there's something in there that mentions, and anything else, right, that falls within the purview of the department, you know, you're expected to kind of hop on and assist. And they're having a lot of special projects that this individual has definitely helped out with. Grants, the Green Communities Grant was one that is related to our department, our division. So he took that role on as well. And there's other projects, small projects that kind of come up that aren't necessarily falling in any bucket perfectly, and you know, they help out and assist on that manner as well. But I don't know if I fully answered your question, Councilor Payano, but
Yes, it does. Thank you for that. So my next question is, so you've mentioned that this person has been in the department for how long?
so this person, I believe, was hired in November of 2019. Does that sound about right, Sue?
Go ahead.
That does sound about right.
Oh yeah, around that time frame, this person was hired, and I believe when we met with the mayor recently to discuss the budget items, this came up, what the change represented, and it was something that was negotiated by the individual in the city, and it was outlined in an offer letter, a change after 6 months.
So this is not a union position. This is a non-union position.
No.
Okay.
That's
So
correct.
so in the contract that this person signed with us, we said that 6 months of good service, we were going to give increase the salary by $5,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
I'd just like to make a correction, Counselor. This is a union position.
It is a union position.
It just started because upon one of the positions being removed, this is in the Supervisors Administrators Union, and there was a position that was removed from that, the city clerk in particular. When the city clerk retired, that position became a non-union position. And our agreement with the union was the city clerk would come out and the administrative assistant boards went in. So I believe that's the position that went into the union just recently.
So Director Arnell, so this used to be a non-union position and then it became a union position?
That's correct.
Okay. So I don't know what this person had agreed contractually with the previous administration. Will now any further increases in salary, is that going to be geared to whatever is in the next union contract, or does it still follow whatever was outlined in a previous individual contract?
Well, I believe the initial hiring is up to the city, and then this position will be subject to the collective bargaining of the Supervisors and Administrators Union. So, whatever they negotiate, this person will partake in.
Right.
In
so
that union.
yeah, but negotiate as a whole. But I think that's different than negotiating individually. It just to make a note, the current salary for this position is just it's 100 plus over whatever's on the ordinance. So just to keep that in mind, my concern was us coming into an agreement with an individual and already, essentially violating our rules when we initially came to the agreement and said that we were going to go over 5,000. I think when we do these type of things, we got to make sure that we just do the legwork and go to the city council and make those changes. I think a change of salary by a few thousand is not something that's going to be controversial with the city council. So we just have to keep that in mind. And thank you, Director Arnello, for informing us that this is a union position. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mark, for providing clarity there.
Mr. Pino, thank you, sir. So I guess I'll just make a comment. I won't make a question. The administrative assistant to the boards, we had a long tenured incumbent who actually my decade on the planning board had served for a few decades. And I was one of those that thought she was not paid appropriately. And I would just note some regret that, a year after the retirement, that we are doing something about it as a city. I would suggest, and Mr. Soto, it's not your, I'm not placing blame on you, but certainly if we want to retain talent, and if we want people to feel that there's upward mobility and movement and the ability to better ourselves, that we should probably be a little more equitable. And again, this isn't you, Mr. Soto, but I can't help but notice from one budget to the next, an individual change, and there's a salary increase, even if it is $5,000. There's lots of folks out there would appreciate $5,000, and I certainly would be one of those. So there is no question. I just want to make that comment. And with that, I have no further questions or comments, and would ask if there are other counselors that do have questions and comments.
I do.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions for Mr. Soto. On the stipend portion, the $5,000 for fiscal year 2021, what special project did you take on during that time?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of your question, Councilor Rodriguez?
For the $5,000 stipend of fiscal year 2021, what was the special project that you took on for you to be able to get the $5,000 stipend?
That's a great question. So two main projects that I worked on, if you recall, the PPP loans, as well as the EIDL opportunities, grant opportunities to help small businesses, those came out. And one of the challenges that communities had was taking those federal dollars. We actually got some CDBG funding as well, about $1.2 million. Taking all the funding that we received and that individual business owners had access to, and figuring out a way to funnel those dollars into the hands of the small businesses. One of the things that we were dealing with was a lot of businesses didn't necessarily have the proper documentation to even apply. So our team, we put together a system that would allow us to get them ready to apply, and then work with a coalition of partners in the Valley to form a group that essentially what we ended up doing for the PPP loans was working with financial institutions, partners of ours. Reading Cooperative was one of them, that would take those applications and literally move them to the front of the line in the application process. If you recall, the PPP loans, the IDL was really administered. The applications would come into the local banks. And then if bigger businesses, for example, had relationships with those bankers, they would put their application first. So you would have, it weren't really distributed equitably. And you would see businesses that were otherwise healthy, getting really huge payouts from PPP, and the smaller businesses on the ground were left kind of just, without any resources. So we worked to create that system. That was one, I think, general thing that I helped out with and help administer, really figuring out a way to, for businesses to apply. That was number one thing. And then we also worked with local accounting services to work with the businesses to take their very informal, books and turn them into proper profit and loss statements that then they could present to the banks and apply. So this was a collaborative effort. But like I said, 70% of the time that we were spending during those months was really figuring out how can we get the dollars into the hands of the businesses that weren't really prepared. A lot of them, as they reached out, didn't know that these resources were available. So much of the work was really propping up that infrastructure to deliver those services. And happy to report that at the end of it, we were able to deliver more than around $1.5 million into the hands of small businesses through the PPP program that many of the businesses did not even know they were eligible to receive. So again, it was a collaborative effort. My colleague Encarnacion was critical in that effort as well. But I think together we were both recognized with a little salary, or I should say a stipend increase there. That was not anything that we asked for. That was something that came from the mayor's office. Like, hey, we recognize the hard work that you guys are doing in your team to make this happen, and the really long hours that we were working to make that come to fruition. So in a nutshell, it's really setting up the infrastructure to deliver those services and communicate out to the businesses the opportunities that were available. Additionally, there were a few projects, economic development projects, that were in process when I got to Lawrence. One of them was the $4 million project, the Riverwalk, to do mass work. That particular project needed guidance and needed project management, and I stepped in and was working on that. And then there was a second round for me of the MassWorks grant that we got together with our partners, worked with TC to craft a narrative that was compelling, and submitted that to the state for the Island Street project, which we had the pleasure of working on, Councilor Rodriguez.
Yeah, but that was that's part of your regular job, not the special project that stipends is basically designed for.
It actually is not part of my regular job. It kind of falls in economic development. Planning is something separate. I think traditionally we can help out, economic development and supporting those grants, but the way that we kind of broke down the job responsibilities when it came to grants was that I would take on identifying new grant sources and working with teams to, either myself apply for them or work with teams to craft narratives to submit for the grants. So that's something that typically falls outside of planning. There are departments in other communities where planning and economic development are more joined. There's a planning and economic development director, but here, as kind of stands for us, they are separated, and I did take that on as a separate additional task.
Did you have any stipend for fiscal year 2020?
I'm sorry, any what?
Did you have any stipend for fiscal year 2020 when you joined the city?
I did not.
So what is that for fiscal year 2022? What you have in a $7,500 stipend on there, $2,500 more than last year. Can you explain to me what is the special project that you're going to be taking on this fiscal year 2022 for us to justify that stipend of $7,500?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a continuation of much of what I described just now for the first stipend.
So the PPP and the state loan, that's not going to exist.
That actually does exist. It exists because businesses still need to report out. So some of these loans can be forgiven. So there's still a process for businesses to report out. And I think the big thing that I'm working on are grants. So as an example, the tragic accident that happened at Five Corners a couple of weeks ago, our department quickly, turned around, wanted to understand, well, what was the work that the planning department has done in the past to figure out solutions for the intersection. And we quickly worked with TC together. We're working with the mayor's office on that. And there are grants that are going to come from any other transportation projects as well. So there still is a pretty big, let me back up. One of the things that we've seen is an increase.
I guess we lost him.
Looks like we lost Mr. Soto, yes.
I can add a little to this discussion. The stipend that Pedro received in FY21 was not for the entire fiscal year. It was only for 3/4 of the fiscal year. So stretching it out over the entire fiscal year covers that increase of the $2,500.
You guys hear me now?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Pedro,
thanks
let
for
me
that,
ask
too.
you, now that you mentioned that the stipend is gonna be part of any special projects coming up. Especially you mentioned the accident happened on Five Corners and the planning department, went and looked for any particular solution. But I feel like, if you're working with with DEC on developing those set of plans, that's part of your regular job. I mean, what is your regular job then?
No, that is my my regular job. So one of the things that I agreed to as Mayor Rivera was leaving the city was that grant opportunities that came up, and it's actually a big effort to bring dollars into the city. And I think we're close now, since my coming onto the city, we're close to $7.58 million in grants that we brought in. So not specifically for transportation, I don't think it does fall in my purview here, but there are a lot of economic development related projects that still need assistance in getting funding through the door. And anything else, any other assistance that, economic development may need. So I think that in and of itself it constitutes, a huge lift that really falls outside of the purview of planning per se.
Can you please send out the amount of dollars that quantify and justify the stipend in regard to dollars? You mentioned that it's about, you say 7 point something million dollars.
Well, I wouldn't characterize it in that way. I don't think that I've had any conversations with our prior mayor that says,
No, because forget about previous mayor. This stipend coming up is fiscal year 2022. So
right.
we're talking about this budget. Previous budget, it's already passed.
So
we're talking about for the future.
Yeah, so you would like me to send over a list of
and then how we justify this $7,500.
Okay.
So if you want to put it on perspective of grants, I would like to know, grants that we're receiving today that we didn't receive in the past, that we can probably say yes. I remember back then one of my my first few budgets, that I keep on seeing more dollars coming in when another employee was there, and she quantified her amount of dollars extra coming to the city in different type of grants of about $18 million, and we were able to justify that, and it was very successful to the city, and I was very happy. I would like to know anything that is in regard to that, if it's any. We celebrate it together, and if it's not, and then we can discuss this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, close to $8.5 million we brought in. So I can outline that and provide that to the committee.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate your answers. I have no more questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you, Mr. Soto. Are there further questions of the planning director or Ms. Fink? Hearing none, I would like to thank Mr. Soto for his presentation and explanation of his budget this evening, and thank you, Mr. Iannello, for your support. Thank you, Ms. Fink. Thank you, Mr. Soto. We will see you on Tuesday, June 22nd at the special meeting of the City Council.
Thank you. Have a night.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure. Is that Mr. Soto who spoke?
No, Councilor Pano.
Mr. Pano, sir.
Yeah, no, I just have a question for Director Iannello. I'm looking for, so one of the things that I found confusing was, so as far as salaries, I'm looking for the Community Development Director. It wasn't listed on the Community Development Department.
The
And
community
what-
development director is paid out of the community development grant funds. So I think Vilma mentioned that a portion of her salary, or well, let me see if I can get the page in front of me. They listed, there's a line item for, can't remember how they phrased it, but here it is.
Non-HUD
HUD
grants.
grant eligible salaries. And that is the portion of Vilma's salary and Sue's Fink's salary that is not chargeable to grants. So I'm guessing, you know, a certain percentage of their salary is, they look to the city to fund. Probably looks like, you know, 20, 30%, something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pyton. With that, I'm going to break the announced agenda at the top of the meeting and recognize the fact that we have been joined by the mayor of the city of Lawrence, Mr. Candace Vasquez, a former colleague of ours months ago. Mr. Vasquez, if you would, the floor is yours if you would like to address the body or your budget.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present the budget of the Office of the Mayor tonight. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. Councilors, I was in another meeting, so I had to have a delayed start as a result of that. But if we look on page 26, 27, that's where we have the mayor's office in the budget. You're going to see that there's an overall change of an increase in $51,454. Primarily, this is due to a change that you will find in the personnel items. So in the administrative, so if we look at the in the former budget for fiscal year 21, we had special assistant to the mayor, one position budgeted, and another two positions, also special assistants to the mayor budgeted, one on the amount of $38,146 and $66,254. I am removing those from the position, and instead, you know, in our current orders, you know, ordinance, it states that it should be an administrative aid to the mayor. So I have changed that from special assistant to the mayor to administrative aid to the mayor. And each of those positions will pay out $44,000 a year in accordance with what the ordinance currently reads in the city. So that is primarily the big difference. Now, when you do know, when you see, I have made some significant cuts in purchase of services, that sum up $2,500. Also for supplies, $2,400, and other charges and expenses on the amount of $15,023. And that's how you are able to get the difference. I am open for any questions or discussion. In the administrative aids to the mayor, so what was budgeted in the previous year, it was 3 positions in total. I am respectfully requesting that you will approve an additional position for the office. This office clearly has, you know, a lot of requests made by constituents. In the past, there were, you know, other positions, other folks that supported this office, and, you know, understanding the need of the community and us wanting to be more accessible to members of the community, I think will be a benefit to the city of Lawrence to ensure that we can continue to provide for those individuals. So I respectfully request, you know, approval for that. I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will ask my colleagues other questions of the mayor. Mr. Mayor, looks like you are off the hook with any questions. For clarification, earlier when we took up the Office of the Mayor's budget, did I understand is MMA, is our subscription to MMA one of those items that was cut?
So MMA was, from my understanding, you know, when as a council president, the way that I had it old budget, when I requested it, it was listed under the city council's budget, specifically for other purchase services on the amount of $8,500, which it seems like it's still in the council. It has not been spent. So I have made the cut from the mayor's office. So I had it listed as when I was a former council president on the purchase of services, and here in the mayor's office, the mayor had it listed for all the charges and expenses. So there should be funding available. If not, we can work collectively to ensure that we continue to pay for the MMA service.
Thank you. No further questions.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rodriguez, sir.
No, I just wanted to make sure that, services like MMA are very important to getting information, trustful information and information that are vital for the education of the different elected officials, inclusive and not inclusive only the city councilor, but also every other department. And I think that what the mayor was referring to was more like the $8,500. It was more like the ClearGov services that we have while he was on the city council as a city council president, and the MMA services was shared by the mayor's office, and that's why we as a councilor we were not responsible for MMA. Instead, yes, a service coming out of MMA that it was the ClearGov services to make sure that people understand our budget. It was paid through the city council. And last year we maintained it, and I hope that those type of things are very important that we maintain. So we need to work together to make sure that we maintain the MMA services. I take advantage of the MMA big time. I'm a member of the MMA, and
MMA has been very beneficial to the city of Lawrence over the last couple of years. So that's something that I strongly support and believe in. I agree.
I know I appreciate your input. And definitely we have to come up with something, work together to make sure we have the funds available.
Definitely.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Rodriguez.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate, as an individual, I appreciate the comments. I know, Mr. Rodriguez, you represent many councilors, aldermen, and local officials on an MMA committee. And I know, current Mayor Vasquez and the personnel office, we're leveraging the power of MMA to advertise the city clerk's position. So definitely, I think we all recognize the benefit of our participation. And Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for reaffirming your support, and Mr. Rodriguez for your leadership on MMA on all of our behalfs, legislative body behalf. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that just for the public, it might be nice to spell out what MMA stands for. It's the Massachusetts Municipal Association.
Yes, not the fighting thing, right?
We get hung up in these acronyms.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
People at home appreciate it.
Any further questions or comments?
Anyone have anything for the mayor? Hearing none. Mr. Mayor, thank you for making time to get here this evening. We appreciate it. We look forward to taking it up for a vote on Tuesday, June 22nd.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And once again, my office is open for any councilors that wishes to come and, speak specifically on any budget item. Feel free to connect with me directly, and we'll arrange time to discuss the budget, individually if necessary. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. With that, we turn to collectively the last item of the evening, which is our capo, Mr. Mark Ianello, and all things finance. There are several categories in finance. For those at home and those that are not familiar, to include the comptroller, purchasing, IT, the assessor, treasurer, debt, risk management, other financials, as well as personnel and IGA and employee benefits. I have the pages for them all. I'm going to ask Mr. Ryanello. I'm going to give him the wheel, if you will, and tell him to please, or ask you, Mr. Ryanello, to please lead us through this cavalcade of different departments that you oversee. And as we proceed, if you would just identify for the counselors what page it's on in the budget book. And I would suggest we take it one by one, stop a discussion, and then move on, as opposed to taking about 12 items up and then coming back for questions. So with
Yep.
that long-winded introduction, Mr. Ainello, I'm going to turn it over to you. And as we had discussed offline before this meeting, if you could, at one point where appropriate, just talk to us a little bit about ARPA funds. And I don't know what that acronym stands for, so I'm going to let you, when we get there, tell us all what ARPA stands for. I know it's the federal monies from the Biden administration, but don't know what the acronym spells out. Just know it's good.
Yep, I'll get to that. Good evening, counselors. I just thought I would start with giving a general overview of how we prepared this budget. I know Mayor Vasquez gave last week, introduced the budget to the counselors, gave an overview. So I just wanted to reiterate that overview and explain how we put this budget together, which will tie into the ARPA funds there. So first, the way we presented this budget was we asked, or started the budget process was, we asked all departments to level fund their budgets to the prior year, and then submit individual memos for anything that they felt was necessary for the upcoming budget. So at least we knew we would start with a level funded budget, and then we would add certain things as departments needed it. So that's pretty much what our budget process was. We met with all the departments with their budget requests, and then with the mayor, we reviewed all of their memos, which asked for additional items in their budget, and we reviewed those requests during their budget meeting or offline in a separate meeting. And some of those things got funded, some of them didn't. We figured out for some departments who asked for certain things, we said, oh, we can deal with that down the road. We'll deal with that when we put together the capital plan, or we'll deal with, we might be able to fund that out of the PAYGO capital fund. So there's different avenues that we took to kind of keep the general fund budget as trim as we could get it. One of the things that helped us this year with the general fund operating budget was the ARPA funds. And what that stands for is the American Rescue Plan Act. As Councilor Abdu just mentioned, that was from the Biden 1.6 trillion, I think, was the overall budget. The funds were announced, a few months ago in March, I believe. The city's share of the ARPA funds, as the acronym is referred to, we're going to get a direct funding share of $41,807,000. That's going to be direct funds from the federal government. The way that was distributed was the federal government or the federal Congress determined that the money available for cities and towns was going to be distributed directly to any city or town with a population of 50,000 or more. It was going to be distributed using the community development funding formula. So that's why it's for the city of Lawrence, it's 41,807,000 and change. There also is in a piece of the pie from the federal government. There was a share for county governments. In Massachusetts, there's only one or two county governments still around. The rest of them were abolished decades ago. So that county money is going to pass from the federal government to the state, and the state is going to distribute that to cities and towns. So our expected share of that pot of money, I believe it was $5 or $8 billion that's going to come to Massachusetts. Our share of that is approximately 10 million, maybe 10 to 13 million. So in total, we're going to receive 50 to 53 to 54 million dollars. I saw an estimate as high as 55 million, but somewhere in that range is what we're going to receive for American Rescue Plan Act funds. The interim rules just came out on May 10th. There's been a number of, obviously a lot of interest in how can we use those funds. Many cities and towns want to use it for roads and sidewalks and things like that. So far, the guidance has been that it cannot be used for that. It's intended to deal with anything COVID related and to get businesses and residents back up, get them assistance as soon as possible. And they felt the cities and towns could do that most directly. There are some things that can be used on, such as water sewer projects and broadband. Your guess is as good as mine why those were brought out first, but the water sewer obviously is health related, and I guess broadband was to help with, because they know that's a shortfall around the country. So I guess they stuck broadband in there to help. There are a bunch of different initiatives that the money can be used on for public health assistances and things like that. I don't really know all of the details. I've attended quite a few sessions, webinars, if you will. The last one was Friday night from the Governmental Finance Officers Association. So there are people all around the country. And in the chat rooms, they all had many questions about, can it be used for this? Can it be used for that? And no one could really answer those questions yet. The interim rules are just a little too fresh. But Senator Warren's office also had a webinar last week. She was that session was very helpful. But again, they couldn't answer a lot of the questions. But many of the questions that were asked by the area mayors were taken by the staff, and they're going to try and get questions directly from the Treasury to see if we can get see if some of the funds, some of the uses that were suggested could be accommodated. In general, though, the funds are going to be pretty strictly available for COVID-19. One of the things that was part of the ARPA funds was the ability to use ARPA funds to make up for lost revenues because of COVID. And the way they define the lost revenues will be using your FY 17, 18, and 19 revenues and compare the growth rate for those years to the amount that's in the legislation, which is 4.1%. So if our growth rate and revenues was 5%, then we could use a higher number. And if it's less than 4.1%, the government says, now go ahead and use the 4.1% growth rate, apply that to the FY19 base year. And those are the funds that you can use to help with 21, 22, and these ARPA funds are good till 12/31 of 2024. So when I put this budget together, using that suggestion that we can use some of these revenues for lost revenue, I identified a few lost revenues that were directly related to COVID, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But as an example, one was Medicaid reimbursements. Our Medicaid reimbursements are normally $1 million to $1.5 million, has approached $2 million in past years. But because the schools were not in session, obviously many of the special education activities that qualify for Medicaid reimbursement were not able to be conducted. So that was those funds come directly to the general fund. So that was about $1 million that we did not was directly related to COVID. There's a couple other line items which I use to balance this budget, which I'll get to when we get to the revenue section in just a moment. But in general, the bottom line was we were able to plan on using some of these ARPA funds to offset some of the losses in this budget. And also because we trimmed the budget, as Mayor Vasquez with many of the departments, there are some increases in a few spots, but the budget overall is pretty trim. So we were able to balance this budget without the use of a Prop 2.5 increase. That Prop 2.5 increase is approximately, I'll get it exactly because I have it here. Is approximately $2 million, but the exact number is $2,133,463. So that's what we normally would have increased the tax levy by. So we were able to eliminate that 2.1 million and make that up with ARPA revenue, which were directly related to COVID, and also trimming the budget to a certain degree so we could keep it balanced. So with that, I'd like to get into the budget pages itself. And I thought I would start on page 3, which is just wanted everybody to know it's the CAFO certification. I'm required to put this CAFO certification in there that it's just a simple paragraph stating that this budget is, I certify that this budget is, can be, the reserves are available to fund this budget, and that they'll continue to be adequate to support the FY22 mayor's recommended budget. So it's my professional opinion as CAFO that we can afford this budget. So I just wanted to point that out. That's on page 3. I'd like to then direct us to page, and you'll see it in your book as page 5A. It's the graphs. They're colored graphs, so hopefully you can, if everybody has their budget book available, I just quickly wanted to go through these graphs because it's illustrative of the budget as a whole. And you can see that on page 5A, you can see the general fund revenues, total general fund revenues. 72.41% of those revenues are state aid. It's called state revenue. It's basically state aid, and almost all of it is for education or Chapter 70 aid. You can see that approximately 25% of our general fund revenues are taxes and excise. Licenses and permits, a very small piece. Everything else is just a sliver, if you will. So between the state aid and the taxes and excise revenue, that's pretty much the general fund revenues of the budget. I do have a more succinct, generalization of what these numbers are, and I'm just pull that out in front of me for a second. And in essence, you can break out those city revenues really into 3 overall categories. The property tax levies about 80 million. The state aid cherry sheets approximately 251 million in total, and then estimated local receipts, which includes the excise taxes and a bunch of other charges, departmental charges for services and things like that, the building permits and all sorts of revenue. That's approximately $14 million. So combine those 3 numbers equal the total general fund revenues of $346 million. So I just also wanted to address your attention to the graph on the bottom of general revenues. Just shows all the numbers that I just read to you in just a little bit more detail. But that's and shows in a bar graph form. But you can see the dollar amounts associated with those revenue items. The 5B is again a graph of the general fund expenditures, and again this is pretty much out of the $345 million budget of expenditures. Education's 72.16% of that pie, and again that's primarily because of the state aid, Chapter 70 dollars. Are so large. Obviously, the school, those funds all come over to the school department, so the school budget is a large share of our overall budget. You can see public safety is about 9.32%. General government, such as my office, the mayor's office, the council, that's 1.89%. DPW is about 3.44%, and the rest of them are just smaller slivers of the pie. Down below on page 5B is the bar graph, which illustrates which contains the dollar amounts of each of those categories I just read off. So you can see the percentage up above and the dollar amounts below. Next on page 5C is just a quick overall of what line items are contained in the budget. So you can see out of the $345 million budget, 51% is personal services or salaries. So a little more than half the budget is really all about salaries. The other wedges, if you will, or other charges and expenses of 24.4%. And that's going to be all the benefits and employee benefits and pension assessments and so forth. Debt service is 3.11% of the overall budget. You can see the purchase of services, which are all the supplies and materials that departments purchase. That's 10.9%. There's a intergovernmental piece of 6.8%. What that is just cherry sheet assessments that we have to pay. So that's reflected here. And again, all of the percentages for the makeup of that budget is contained on page 5C. On page 5D is just a brief listing of the tax levy historically from, it looks like we have from 2016 to 2022. And basically what that is all the years we went up at least 2.5%. We had a few years where we went above 2.5%. And that's because in those years, the city had an excess levy capacity. So we used that levy capacity in those 2000 late 2000 years. Then in FY 10 through 14, we went up the maximum 2.5% in each of those years. The fiscal overseer was certainly driving at that. The state would like us always to go up to 2.5% each year, but obviously we need to get the budget. The mayor has to be comfortable with the budget and also get it comfortable for the city councilors to pass the budget. So, when Mayor Rivera first came in, his goal was to try and decrease the tax levy as much as he could. So you can see in FY 15 there was a 0%. Then in FY 16 we went up the full 2.5%, and then there was a decrease down to 1.6% in 17, 0% again in 18, 2% in FY 19. In FY 20 we were able to get it back to 0 again, and then last year we went the full 2.5%. This year we're back down. We were able to balance this budget without a tax increase. So that's just a brief history of the tax levy. And speaking of the excess tax capacity, when we don't go up to that full 2.5%, that levy amount kind of like sits in a bank account, if you will. And right now, pull out the page. Right now, our excess tax levy capacity is 8.3 million. And just to illustrate what that means is that over the years, beginning in 2000, FY 13 and forward, by not going up the tax levy, had we gone up the tax levy, our levy would have increased a total of 33 million, or the revenues from that levy would have been approximately 33 million that we do not have. So when we don't levy the capacity of last year was 6 million. When we didn't tax the residents, that's $6 million. That means we cannot go back and collect it, but we are now on top of the 6 million. We just added another 2 million, so we have 8.3 million excess levy capacity that we could use if necessary, and it can be appropriated if necessary without needing a referendum, because we're not above Prop 2.5. We can just use our excess levy capacity should there be a case to use it. And I think I illustrated that a few weeks ago when we were discussing the Oliver School. The Oliver School, we're doing that without a debt override, and again we think we can manage that debt service for the 5 or 6 years that we're going to need to support it 100% out of the general fund budget. We think we can manage it with either a planned use of free cash, and if we don't have that available, we certainly can use some of the excess capacity in those out years if necessary. And now that the council has approved the Oliver borrowing, that debt has to be paid or raise in our tax levy or in our budget process, we have to include that in our budget. Once you issue debt, you can't not pay it. We're not able to default here in Massachusetts, so that'll be something where if we do get in trouble with our reserves, we definitely have the excess capacity to lean on, which is also something that is somewhat favorable. In other words, if right now our real estate values are doing very well, you can ask Alexi Vega, our chief assessor, about that. But if there were a downturn in the real estate market, some communities, when they're taxing to the full levy capacity, and this did happen in Springfield when I was there, and the property values don't increase, well, you can't even go up to the Prop 2.5 amount because you hit your levy ceiling. So this cushion, if you will, of 8.2 million, 8.3 million does insulate us from any of those real estate downturns. So I think it's good to kind of like have it sitting in the bank in case we ever needed it. So that's a very positive thing for the excess levy capacity. So I'd like to next, well, maybe I'll just take any questions on what I've said so far. If anybody has any, please stop me. I'm kind of barreling through, I'm trying to get through the front of this budget book quickly. And the next thing I just wanted to touch upon was page 11, which is just a one page of the revenues and expenditures, very high level. And it's very easy to take a look at what we have. And I think it's pretty much what I just illustrated from those graphs. But you can see at the very top of page 11, we have the general fund, the taxes and excise, and all the revenues at the very top. And they subtotal 345 million, as I mentioned. The largest item there is the state revenue, which is the state cherry sheet distribution. The state cherry sheet distribution of 251 million. 200 and just get it in front of me. A good, almost all of it is goes to the school. No, oh, I don't have it. I think it just fell on the floor a moment ago. But I think I have it. But the cherry sheet related to the school department is for FY22, 222 million. So out of the other 25 million or so is unrestricted and undesignated general government aid to the city. That's approximately 22 million or so. So that's our state aid in a nutshell.
Mr. Ryan, before you leave state aid, let me just hold you right there. So we increased to the amount of 13,849 and some change for FY22. That is up significantly if we go back to the first date you referenced of FY19. Is this, and 13.8 million is only year over year, but is this considered durable? Should we expect this in 23? Or is this somehow some sort of stimulus, COVID stimulus, put in the cherry sheet for this year?
No, this was a reflection of the state correcting the Chapter 78 formula. And so the amount coming to the school department for FY22 was increased. Like you said, it's I think it's exactly, I'm pulling my numbers out here. Looks like it's exactly 12,043 over the previous year. And that was related to the legislature fixing the formula. They threw another, I think they did throw some or committed some extra Chapter 70 aid, and they and changed the formula because the communities like here in Lawrence were getting shortchanged, falling further behind the wealthier communities. So they corrected that formula, and that is expected to continue, is my understanding, unless they go back and change the formula. Now, obviously, with the state legislature, Chapter 78 is whatever they can. When they put their budget together, it's whatever they want to fund in total, and then we get a piece of that pie. We get a fairly large piece of the pie because of our demographics and our student population, but that is expected to continue because now they've changed the formula. So if it is, it's not these are not one-time funds. They're not expected to be one-time funds. But with that caveat, if the state budget did run into problems, deficits, and so forth, I imagine the legislature would cut Chapter 78 accordingly. I just don't see that in the forecast, particularly with the American Rescue Plan Act. A lot of that money is going to go to the states, and that will be to help them make up for lost revenue. Just so happens that here in Massachusetts, our revenues seem to be holding pretty good during this pandemic. But having said that, this is expected to continue.
Thanks.
Okay, so just, those are the revenues in a high level nutshell. And again, right at this page right below it are the expenditures by function, general government, public safety, education, and so on. And you can see that the budget for FY22, the revenues are 345 million. And then we have expenditures of the exact same amount. So we have a balanced budget. Below that is just a high level portion of the parking and garage enterprise fund. And the revenues and expenditures will balance out there. I just want to mention, I'll get to that later, in the parking garage and lots enterprise fund. This budget is only balancing because you can see there's 550,000 of other financing sources, and that's the expected subsidy, if you will, from the general fund to balance this budget. As you know, the Museum Square garage has been, under construction or been out of service for approximately a year. And we do expect, we do have the other parking garage and the lots generating revenue. We estimate that of about 409,000, but we do estimate this parking garage in FY22 fund will require a subsidy of 550,000 from the general fund. And I have that reflected under other expenses, which I'll get to later. And if we flip the page, on page 12 is just a high level. That's the airport enterprise fund, which you heard from Mike Miller earlier. And he has 600,000 in revenue, which will take up which will cover his operating expenses. The difference of 12,000 represents indirect costs that we charge to the airport for handling their administrative services like payroll, bill, and general ledger services, and paying all their bills and things like that. The water sewer enterprise is next, and that has a high level. It's approximately 22.3 million in revenues, and they have expenditures of 21.4. The difference of 804,000 is what we, again, those are charges from the general fund to the water sewer enterprise fund for providing administrative services to that department. And then on page 13 are those revenues, just a little more detail. On page 13 at the top is the 345 million in taxes, or all of the charges are kind of delineated up above, and down below you'll see about 20 line items which encompass the taxes and excise line item, which totals 87.9 million. And here you can see that the first two items are the personal property taxes and real estate tax revenue. That's the expected tax levy minus the reserve for abatements and exemptions of 575,000. So in essence, we expect the levy to be 80,403,000, and we subtract out the reserve for abatements and exemptions, and the net revenue to the city will be 79,828,000 for those two line items. You can see the next largest number here is the motor vehicle excise tax, which I mentioned. We have approximately 5.5 million, which is a little bit more than what we budgeted last year. But you can see in prior years, in FY19, we actually collected 5.6 million, 5.5 million in 20, and through May 11th, we've already collected over 6 million. So in spite of the pandemic, and I marvel at this every year. I just had a conference call with Standard & Poor's the other day, and I reiterated to them as well. I marvel every year as the number of vehicles in Lawrence, and I expect some year we're going to see a decrease in revenues, because I figure at some point people will have stopped buying new cars and drive their cars a little longer. But it seems here in Lawrence anyway, we seem to be defying that the logic, or my logic doesn't seem to hold true. So we have our excise bills and excise levies have been maintaining their levels. And just for so far in this year, the first two commitments for this year have been, there was a decrease in commitment number 1, which was issued in February of approximately 99,000. But commitment number 2, which was issued in March, is 643,000 more than the prior year. So, and we've netted in the first 2 commitments of the year, we're up $500,000 in motor vehicle excise. So I'm comfortable with estimating those numbers. The rest of the numbers right below, I'm not going to go through every line item, but you can see there's interest and penalties on taxes and other items, motel tax, and a few items like that. Some of those items have decreased this year, but again, because of the American Rescue Plan, if they did decrease, we're able to make that revenue up. The big next largest category is on page 14, and that's the charges for services that departments have. The largest one on this page is the downtown parking. We have 385,000 estimated. Those are parking tickets. Even though we don't have the meters up and running yet, we're forecasting a decrease in prior years. We still do have a revenue from our tickets that we issue. And then many of the other receipts on this, or revenues on this page, are from the clerk's office and collector's office and a few other areas like that. The licenses and permits are the next category on page 15. And the largest item on that one, you're going to find from the building inspector's office, 750,000. There's our estimate for building fees, electrical fees, 165,000, and so on. So the total for that category is 1.7 million. Federal revenue, again, that's as I mentioned earlier, you can see the Medicaid reimbursement. So far this year, we've only collected 486,000. We had estimated $1 million for last year, but because of COVID, we're not going to reach that number. But for FY22 mayor's budget, clearly we can justify that, get the number back to where it used to be in prior years, to $1,450,000, and thanks to the American Rescue Plan Act. State revenue is again the cherry sheet aid. It totals 251 million. And here's you can see the school aid is 222 million, and the unrestricted general government aid is 21.5 million. There's a charter school reimbursement of 6 million, so that goes to the school department.
I know, if I could,
yep.
I'm not sure if I speak on behalf of all my colleagues, but I'd like to stop us right here.
Mm-hmm.
I know I personally have some questions regarding assumptions made for 22.
Yep.
So yeah, if we could just dive in with my questions and see if there's more. And I don't need to go too far back, just pages 14 and 15. I'll quickly go over the items, the assumptions I'd like you to describe, and then we'll go back. White goods pickup, downtown parking, city clerk, taxi plates, surplus auction, and cable TV license. There are some assumptions made. I'll go over them again, but there's assumptions made. I'd just like you to walk us through your thinking on those assumptions. White goods, for instance, there appears to be a drop. And downtown parking, you've already described that.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have a bit of a change, less receipts in taxis, and increase in auction, and then there's been in the cable TV license, it's 0, but it's dropped tremendously since FY20. Can you just explain those?
Well, basically what we do, this is category called charges for services. So we look at the totals, about 1.4 million. That's what it was last year. We're trying to keep it similar to that amount. But what I do is go through each of the line items, starting at the very top, you can see recycling. We try and adjust these line items each year for what we think is going to be collected. So you can see that last year we had for recycling $9,000 in 21, but collected through May 11th, we had 40. Well, when I put this budget together sometime in April, or very beginning, late April, that line item probably had 40,000. So I upped that line item from 9,000 to 40,000 because I knew that's where it would be at. And you can see through May 11th, now after we ran this, the budget, it was 45,000. So I'm very comfortable with that 40,000. And basically that's what we did with all these line items. You can see the 80,000 internments last year, and I increased to 100,000. And when you look through May 11th, we've collected 139,000. So I was very comfortable increasing that line item to 100,000 for 22. And the white goods, I just did the opposite. Obviously, we had 6,000 budgeted last year. I look, see what we've taken in prior years. 6,000 was probably related to 19 because we took in 6,700. But sure enough, in FY20, we only took in $2,700. And so far through May 11, we only took in 700. So I decreased that line item to 2,000. And that's basically the approach I took with almost all of these line items here. I left them alone if they were reasonable. Again, for us, materiality is quite large. I was kind of getting at the minutia here, changing these small dollars. Usually I don't bother because we really look at the overall category. As far as the Department of Revenue is concerned, when they're reviewing our numbers, they're basically looking at the 1.4 million total for that category. And if it's overall year over year, approximately the 1.4 million, they're fine. They don't look at each line item in detail the way I have it. But I did take the opportunity this year to try and make sure most of them were lined up with the prior years and or at least through May 11. If that answers your question, if you have anything more specific, I think I took care of the downtown parking. You mentioned one other. I took care of the white goods.
I mentioned a couple others, but your explanation took care of two of them. But I'll finish with, well, actually, let me comment. For instance, on white goods, the precipitous drop there, recycling, your assumptions are reasonable based on trajectory. I guess my questions are policy questions that I should ask of the mayor or his staff as to, recycling. Do we, obviously it's 45 this year, recommended it's 40, but that, and again, I'll take this up with him, but, we talk about a robust recycling program to offset costs and waste. That doesn't look too aggressive since it's flat. And then, if you go down to cable TV licenses in FY20, we were collecting 55,000 and now we'll settle at 5. Or rather 9, sorry, not am I reading that?
Yep.
So I guess those are more policy questions than they are financial assumption questions. So I guess I'll leave that for.
Well, I think I can address the cable TV. I believe there was some fee paid in FY20. That's how the 55,000 came in, and we went into the general fund. And I believe last year that line item was committed to the IT department to upgrade some equipment. So it was not going into the general fund. It was put into a special project fund so they could upgrade the equipment. I can't remember exactly. I think it was the fiber related to increasing the city council's signal in City Hall. You guys were not on the fiber network. You were on something else. So if I recall, we asked the cable companies for some money to complete that fiber project or upgrade your lines to fiber, if I recall.
I think they had us on telegraph lines.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That satisfies my questions for charges for services. Colleagues, do you have questions on page 14, charges for services, before we flip to 15? Hearing none, let's move to licenses and permits. Do you, if you could, Mr. Rhinello, licenses and permits, I guess it goes again to assumptions. Building inspection fees, I see we're on target through May 11th with the 22. But my question would be is why are we down 200,000 from the year before? Again, maybe that's a question of capacity or policy. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that's a function of, I don't know, we have to talk
line
to
item?
Michael Armano, the ISD director, but obviously you can see in FY19, we did 800,000. In FY20, and it was an increase of 961,000, but that's reflective of the activity and the building activity in the community. So far, we're at 744,000, which is pretty good. I don't know if we'll hit 800. I don't know if we'll hit 900, but with COVID-19, I know it's going to put I guess they have plenty of activity down in the building department, but I'm not so sure they're going to reach those prior year levels, particularly with lumber going up 4 times, is up 400% is my understanding. So I imagine that's going to put a damper on some developers' projects.
I think Mr. Pan is going to ask what line. I'm sorry, my apologies. Line item 4450 and the licenses and permits.
It's about halfway up to in that category.
Line item number 4453 occupancy permits. Why the very bullish expectation for 150,000?
Well, there's 2 reasons. Number one is so far through May 11th, we've collected 132,000. And the other thing is that we put, you remember a few years ago, we added additional inspectors to start doing, I think it's rental expenses, inspections or something like that. But there's additional effort by the building department or the ISD department to inspect properties, and I believe that's the explanation for the occupancy permits. I felt comfortable increasing that line item a little bit based on the FY21 activity.
Thank you. And my last question is under state revenue 4616, and that's the abatements for the elderly. 19, we had 25,000, 20, 24,000 drops this year. But then we make a recommendation of almost 80,000 for 22. Could you explain that?
That's directly from the cherry sheet. Those are state aid assessments. So I believe that's a function of, and maybe Chief Assessor can answer that for us, Alexi. But in general, these are the any abatements for the elderly that are granted. The state reimburses or they're processed. The abatements are issued by the state, and they pass those revenues on to us to cover the some of the costs of the abatement process. So that they reimburse us, if you will. So that's right off the cherry sheet aid that we receive. So I don't make up those numbers. Those are printed every year. All these numbers come directly from the state. Once the cherry sheet is issued and the governor, when the governor's budget is put out, the cherry sheet aid is part of that process in January. That's when the cherry sheet generally comes out.
Thanks, sir. Are there questions of colleagues? All right, Mr. Rhinello, you are free to proceed.
Okay, page 16 just has we call it other intergovernmental revenue, but you can see basically the largest line item here is parking fine violations. These are the parking fines I spoke about earlier. I thought that was in the downtown parking. The downtown parking was funds that we expect to receive once the parking meters go back online. So there's the largest item here is basically parking ticket violations. And we think, again, our guys are still issuing tickets. We've only got 700, or we've received 746,000 through May 11. So basically, even though we haven't been issuing tickets, we've been collecting. The tickets have been issued, and Kelly and Ryan started taking over the collection of those parking tickets, and they had a very good year collecting those back ticket violations. But we do expect to our guys are, except for the metered area, our guys are out there ticketing as well, and we collect those revenues. So I'm fairly comfortable with that number of 700,000. The civil motor vehicle infractions, those are tickets written by the police and comes back through the state, and our estimated share is 100,000. And sure enough, we've received 122,000 through May 11th. So I'm comfortable with that number as well. So overall, for that category, I'm estimating 968,000 to balance this budget, and we've collected over $1 million so far through May 11th. So I'm comfortable with that. If some of the line items are off, in total, we're going to hit that targeted number. Miscellaneous revenue, we basically the largest item here is interest income. It's a big decrease from budget last year, and obviously that's a reflection of market conditions. You can see our interest income in FY19 and 20 was almost 1.8 million and 1.9 million respectively. This year through May 11, we've only collected 250,000 because the interest on bank accounts has gone from a little over earning 2% on your excess cash, and now we're down to the latest just received this morning from the MMDT, which is where we keep a good chunk of our excess cash, is 9 basis points, which is less than 0.1%. So it's it's just a function of interest rates are just so low. Unfortunately, our interest income's dropping accordingly. We have collected about 250,000. I'm estimating about 400,000 for next year. Hopefully, that's where we'll end up. Maybe not 400,000 for FY21, but we should be. Hopefully, we can reach that target. The interest rates are starting to climb a little bit, so maybe we'll get. Hopefully, we can reach our 400,000 estimate. The miscellaneous revenue is just usually those are just reimbursements that departments have, and they're not generally repeatable. So I dropped that number down to 7,000, which is probably a very low number. I didn't want to put in. We don't expect any. I know we'll get some reimbursements from departments, whether somebody overpays an invoice and we get the recovery in a later year, or whatever miscellaneous income a department might take in. They sell a map or something like that. I felt comfortable dropping that number down to a lower number, and if it comes in higher, that'll be great for our bottom line. Other financing sources and uses are just the primary. These are transfers from the enterprise fund, as I mentioned. 878,000 represents the water and sewer income or source to cover our indirect costs, and it also includes the parking garage and lots enterprise fund. The indirect cost of about 30,000. In the airport is 12,000, as illustrated. So we charge the enterprise funds approximately 890,000 for expended items that are expended out of the general fund, such as my salary, the comptroller's salary, the treasurer's salary, and all the other costs there too. We have an allocation that we use. It's pretty it's pretty fair. It's probably a little too fair to the enterprise funds, but we get our money's worth out of them. So if I can just, that pretty much explains all of the revenues. Again, on page 17, just has the parking fund, which I kind of went through a moment ago, and the airport and the water sewer on page 19. And that's just their revenues just broken out, just in a little different or a little more detail than I illustrated earlier, but it's still just a water sewer revenues. The pages 19 and on is just, again, just a summary of all the departmental expenditures. So if you don't want to look in all the detailed pages down below, and you're looking for a high level place to see what departments are spending, these pages here, you can usually find what they're spending at a very high level. And with that, I guess I'll jump into page 29, which begins the Department of Administration and Finance. We still call it Budget and Finance, but technically it's the Department of Administration and Finance, and I'm the Chief Administrative and Finance Officer, but I still go by Finance Director, Budget and Finance. It's all the same to me.
Mark,
Yep.
hold on.
Sure.
Are there any questions at this point? Okay, sorry, Mr. Ionello, please
Okay,
continue.
no problem. And again, anybody can just jump in whenever they feel necessary. I'm not offended if you interrupt. I'm fine with that. So again, on page 21 is just a high level explanation of what the high level expenditures by department. You can see the Office of Budget and Finance is 246,000. The Comptroller's Office subtotals at 504,000. The Purchasing Department's 129,000. The Information Technology is 1.2 million. Assessor's Office is 461,000. Treasurer's Office is 328,000, or Treasurer side of the Treasurer Collector's Office. I should correct myself. It's a Collector Treasurer's Office. We just break their budget into a Treasurer side and a Collector side. So the Treasurer's 328, the Collector's 304, and the Office of Personnel is now within the Admin and Finance Division, and they're 294,000. So as I go over these, the department heads are here tonight for each of their respective budgets. If there's any questions to the Comptroller, the Personnel Director, or the Treasurer, they're here to answer any questions, whether it's related to their budget line items or just their department overall. Sometimes this is the only time we have an opportunity. I meet with you guys all the time, but these other departments might only see you once a year. So I do want to let you know that these people are all here. I'll just go over quickly on page 30, which is the Budget Finance Division. And on page 31 are the salaries of the Budget Finance Division. You can see the CAFO salary, and then the which is Chief Administrative and Finance Officer. And then I have a budget analyst / internal auditor that we pay out of this out of my line item. And those two line items are $237,640. I have employee training. I kept a level funded to the prior year. Basically, what that employee training is used for, not just it's used for the division, but I fund a little bit in my department in case anybody needs any training from Munis or some of the Ramona and the Treasurer go on certain for their Mass Municipal Accountants and Auditors Association and the Mass Collector Treasurers Association. If there's any training offered in their areas of expertise, they can come to me, and I'll at least have $7,000 to share with all my divisions. The office supplies, again, just covering our paper and supplies in the office. In-state travel, again, I've never used the in-state travel line item, but people within my division might need, it's really just mileage for car mileage if they attend some seminars. And some people in my division might need something. It's there in case they need it. Dues and memberships for me are generally the Governmental Finance Officers Association, the Mass Governmental Finance Officers Association, and that's pretty much it. There's roughly about $600-700 for the GFOA, and I think it's $75 a year for the MGFOA. Let's see, and then next page and the next department is the Comptroller's Office. And I just want to, Marone is here to answer any questions on her budget, but I did want to mention to the counselors that in this budget also contains the payroll department. We have our payroll director, Donna Cole. She's on the call as well. Donna's the payroll director, and she also has a payroll specialist, and one of the principal clerks works on payroll. And then for the comptroller side of the operation, it's the comptroller, the assistant comptroller, city accountant, a principal clerk. And then, as you can see, there's some longevity and clothing allowance for the staff members in that budget as well. I do have an increase for the comptroller salary. As I think I mentioned last year, the comptroller's salary is far below what it should be. It should be well in the well above that. So we've been trying to get that salary up a little bit at a time. I think I raised it a little bit last year. I'm going to raise it a little bit this year as well, and probably it'll have to be raised for the next couple of years to get her to get that position to the salary where we're competitive with our other local communities. Other than that, her budget again has a little bit of employee training. That's for Ramona and the staff to take the Mass Municipal Accountants and Auditors Association seminars and things to stay up on our municipal accounting. And then there's, again, some operating supplies and office supplies. Primarily, most of that is paper and W-2s and 1099 forms and things like that the comptroller and payroll office issues. And I guess I could just keep going. Please stop me if you need to. But next is the purchasing department. Purchasing department has 2 employees, a purchasing director who is new. I'd like to introduce her. Genovi, I believe she's on the call. Genovi Martinez is our new purchasing director. She came on board around January. She's a phenomenal purchasing agent. And so she's our director, and she has one principal account clerk, which she actually shares with me. Primarily does a lot of the work, is helpful in the purchasing side, but that person sits outside my office. So they also kind of work for me, and I occupy her time with at least stopping people at my door so they don't just get to walk in, but most people walk in anyway. But I do have, I do use Marlene to kind of, or Genovi and I do share Marlene to a certain degree. Again, in the purchasing side, they do a lot of advertising. I think I mentioned earlier, there might have been a few bucks extra in the purchasing department a few years ago, and I was able to help out Bill Maloney with the advertising in the clerk's office. But again, the line item, we reduced the line item a couple of thousand, and then we increased it in employee training because there is a lot of training. Genovi should announce she's already a Massachusetts, MSCPPO, whatever the heck that's. Genovi, you can say what the acronym is.
Good evening, everyone. Genovi Martinez, your new purchasing agent. I took about 3 months in the beginning to get certified for the Massachusetts Certified Public Purchasing Official. So it's about 3 courses with a certification at the end from the state. The Office of the Inspector General has these classes because of COVID online. So I was able to get that done. That helps to certify me, as well as the Chief Procurement Officer for the city, just giving me the authority to sign our city contracts and make sure that everything is purchased per Mass General Law, Chapter 30B or Chapter 149 or 39M when dealing with construction. So I was able, thanks to the team, to get that done pretty quickly, and continuing our work in the purchasing department. I had asked to put in some more money to also get extra training and extra continuing education with the Inspector General's office, as well as our principal account clerk, to get her some training in that area as well.
If I could just comment on that unfortunately, even though the training is done by the Inspector General's office, it's not free. Kind of beyond me why it isn't free, because I would think they always complain about municipalities not keeping up to stuff with all the laws. But anyway, the classes are quite expensive. So that's why we need the training of about 4,000. They are, it's not like $50 to take a class with the IG's office. It's several $100s for one class. So that's her budget in a nutshell. I know I'm moving kind of quickly because I know it's kind of late and there's quite a bit more to do. So, but if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me, or when I'm done, you can certainly ask me questions. I'll stick around all night as long as you need me. But at least some of these guys can get going if their budgets are answered. Information technologies, our next budget. That's one of the larger budgets in the city. And obviously with the IT's budget, there's a lot here. We have on page 37 is the MIS director. We increased the technicians from 2 to 3 to help with that department. So there's an increase in the budget line item. And I do have an increase in the MIS director's salary. Again, he's woefully underpaid, and we've got to get his salary up to the level of an IT director for a city of our size. Some of the major things in this budget, and Louis is on the call to answer any specific questions, But basically, the IT budget pays for the entire Munis, the ERP system. We do get some help with that. A fee from the school department. They pay roughly about 25% of that amount, but it's several hundred thousand. It's about 400,000 per year. There's all sorts of other programs that we have, such as all the Windows software, and then Excel, Word, and all that kind of stuff. And that comes out of Lewis's budget, along with we maintain all the city's printers and copiers. Those are lease payments. That's done through Lewis's budget. The telephone system, that's all done through Lewis's budget. So that line item is almost $1 million for purchase of services. And Lewis is here if there's any questions regarding what specifically is in there. But there are a lot of software purchases that are software maintenance fees that we have to pay, and that's done through the IT's budget. One of the reasons why we like to do it through the IT budget is that way we don't have departments purchasing their own software and then conflicting with some other software. So we try and get everybody to work their magic through the IT department. And if they need some software, Lewis kind of make sure that it stays within make sure the solution that they're looking for. There might be a better one that we already have, that we're already paying for. And before we pay for another one, we just want to make sure we do our due diligence. So that certainly helps. Let's see. The assessor's office is next on page 38 and 39. Again, last year there were three, a chief assessor, 2 assessors, and a clerk. And this year they're the same positions. Right now, our principal clerk retired a month or 2 ago, so we're in the final stages of getting a new principal clerk for the assessor's office, so they can get up to staff. But other than that, there's no changes from the last year to this year for that department. Everybody in that department, except for the clerk, and the assessors are in the same union, and that union has not had an increase yet. So they're in negotiations now. Again, in this budget, the largest item that sticks out is the $171,000 for professional services. And that's our contract with RRC, who helps the assessors out with doing the assessing of the city's properties. Excuse me, my cat's in the way. All right, she moved. Yeah, so that's the largest line item, and RRC has been instrumental with helping the assessors. There are experts making sure we use their staff to supplement our assessors, but our assessors don't have there's only 3 of them. We don't have the capacity to get out there and get into the properties as the RRC staff do. So they annually they inspect a number of properties, so that excuse me, Gracie. Every 5 years we have to have all our property revaled. So they have a rotation that every year they're out doing a number of properties, so that at the end of the 5-year period, we've met the requirements of the state of DOR and how we come up with our assessments. Other than that, just a few office supplies. And again, the assessors have some training. All of the assessors have to be recertified. All of our assessors are certified assessors, and they have to have continuing education annually to maintain their certifications. Next on page 40 and 41 is the treasurer's budget. Again, Perla Ortiz is our treasurer / collector. So we have 1/2 of her salary coming out of the treasurer side and the other half of her salary coming out of the collector side. Other than that, the same number of positions in the prior year to this year. She had 3.5 positions last year and 3.5 positions this year. There's also in this budget, there's also quite a few purchase of service line items. There's some lease payments. The lease payments here for the the mail machine and the sorting machine that we have. We have a mailing machine which all of City Hall uses. So we needed some department to maintain it. And since the treasurer's office, we electronically add mail or add postage to the mail machine. It has to be done electronically with bank accounts. So the treasurer's been kind of stuck with that, maintaining lease payments and coming up with the postage every year. But it's they've been doing it for a number of years now, and the mail machine is actually in the outer in my part of my office. Everybody comes into my office to use the mail machine. The sorting machine is used in the comptroller's office because they stuff and mail all of the checks going out to vendors, and payroll uses it for payroll advices. The large item here is the Service Bureau / property tax of $54,000. Those are fees, I believe, to the that we pay to the Registry of Deeds when we when we file our liens with the Registry of Deeds for those parcels for non-payment of taxes. So that's the largest item there. We have some banking service fees of $9,500. They used to be much larger fees, but we've moved to Enterprise Bank, who has a very limited fee structure. Also, the lease payments was for the mail machine, and the postage line item down below is for the postage for that mailing machine. And again, that's citywide. So the treasurer's office does use quite a bit of postage because they mail the vendor payments out to vendors, but the ISD department, the clerk's office, although the elections office, I think, is or did have a machine during last year. During the we rented a separate machine for them, but by and large, the clerk and the assessors, clerk and the election office are using the mail machine in my office. So that pretty much explains that budget in a nutshell. The collector side is this exact same as the treasurer's. Pretty much, you have the same number of positions, 4.5 positions to 4.5 positions this year. And again, they do have a large line item for printing and mailing, $61,500, and that's printing and mailing of tax bills, excise bills, and so forth. There's an employee training line item here because the PERLA, although with the COVID-19, the Mass Collector and Treasurers Association usually holds classes so you can become a certified Mass Collector Treasurer. But unfortunately, those classes have been on hold until through the pandemic. So PERLA is not certified. She should be, unfortunately, through no fault of her own. But she will be certified as soon as humanly possible. And so she needs money in her budget to take that training. And when she does become certified, there will be continuing education required. And also, the Collector Treasurers Association usually does meet twice a year. PERLA has been pre-pandemic. PERLA has been to those sessions, and they're very informative to all the collector treasurers. Show up twice a year and share war stories and so on. It's very helpful. Let's see. I get to the last department is the Office of Personnel, and again on page 45, you can see they had 4 positions last year. They've got 4 positions this year. The personnel director is in this budget along with his benefit aide, a personnel aide, and confidential secretary. The line items in his budget, Frank is here to explain or answer any questions, but the largest line item is other purchase services of $28,000. And generally what that Frank's budget pays for, we have an employee assistance program. He pays for some of the fees associated with workers' comp and unemployment fees that need to be, or professional services that are purchased to handle our workers' comp and handle our unemployment claims. There's also, he takes care of employee physicals for new hires and police officers and things. And then obviously he has some office supplies and operating just for his budget. And that's pretty much it from the operating side or the departments, but there's quite a bit more that are under my division, such as benefits and so forth, which I just wanted to stop here and see if there's any questions anybody had on the departmental operating side, and I'll get to the, won't take too long to get through the rest of the budget, such as employee benefits, intergovernmental charges, and so on.
No, appreciate the stop, Mr. Ryanello. I'm not sure if my colleagues have questions at this time, but I turn the floor over to them. Okay.
Okay, then if we can continue, I'm going to direct you the next, you can see the next tab, one of the tabs in your book is Other General Fund, and it will flip you to page 147. And that's the debt service, which our department puts that, along with the treasurer's office, puts this line item together. So on page 147 is the total debt service of 10.7 million. And on page 148 is a little breakdown of what encompasses that debt service, the principal and interest basically, is all it is broken down. And you can see that there's a decrease of 3.3 million, but really what that is there's also a decrease in revenue of 4 million. Last year was FY21 was the last year we received a payment on the old MSBA program. And we received $4 million in revenue from the state, and it covered the $4 million in debt service that we paid. Well, in FY21, the last payment was made, so the two kind of netted out in prior years. So this year, it looks like the debt service is down $3 million, but also in the revenue section, we were down $4 million from those MSBA payments not being received. So our debt service this year is in a nutshell on this page, but the detail to the debt service is on the very last page in your budget book, and it's a breakdown. I won't go over it now. I'll save it, but there's a breakdown of the actual bonds that are outstanding on page 177, and then 178 is for the water department. So that's the detail of the debt service that is outstanding. And it has, you can see the original loan amount, the outstanding balance last year, the principal and interest paid this year, and the outstanding balance projected to be the outstanding balance at 6/30 of 22. So I'll leave that up to the counselors to take a look at their leisure, but that's a detailed breakdown of debt service. The other line item in here, we do have a little bit of, there's a line called CIP financial policy. Pardon me. And the CIP financial policy is, as I mentioned, if counselors recall, when I presented the last CIP, we do have a capital improvement plan, and we have a financial policy that dictates that 7% of our net general fund revenues will set aside every year to make sure to align for debt service, so we can ensure that we have a capital improvement program. We can count on that those proceeds or that commitment out of the general fund budget. So this year our actual revenue, our actual debt outstanding is only about $10 million, but we are selling bonds this week, actually, or next week they'll be sold. And the debt service on that is anticipated to be approximately $600,000. So that's why we have we have a line item for CIP financial policy. It's not actually outstanding yet, but it will be. That was part of our when we prepared the CIP last year. We do anticipate we fill that 7% financial commitment in with debt service, and we issue as many capital projects as we can to kind of fill up that line item commitment. Next on page 149 are intergovernmental assessments, and the detail of those are on page 150. And there's just a couple worth explaining. The first one is a state assessment. That's really $75,000. I know for councils who remember, that's the state overpaid us or over reimbursed us for non-contributory retirees over the last 20 years. And about 5 years ago, or actually, no, 7 years ago now, the state caught up with their error and insisted we owed them a couple $1 million or $1.5 million, whatever the number was. So we worked with them and they gave us an interest fee. Unfortunately, they couldn't waive the amount due. We came up with this about 7 years ago, but they did allow us to repay it interest-free. So we paid $50,000 for 5 years, and the next 5 years is $75,000. So I believe this is the second year of our $75,000 payment. So that's why there's a $75,000 line item here. That is basically to repay the state for that. We'll be paying that for another 13 years or so. I believe it was a 20-year payback. It was as long as they let me go, but I made it as small as possible. And they agreed, the state treasurer agreed to it, and the board agreed to it. Special education assessment, $56,000. That's right off the cherry sheet. The cherry sheet assessment. When the state comes out with the cherry sheet aid, they also come up with some of the things that we have to pay for. Air pollution is another one. That's the state takes care of some air pollution thing. They must have some monitor somewhere in the state. That's our share of the $18,995. They assess that and take it out of our cherry sheet aid, if you will. Regional Transit Authority, that's the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority assessment. That's our share of their operating budget. We have to come up with $1,187,000, and we don't pay it to the MVRTA. The state takes that out of our cherry sheet and sends it directly to the MVRTA for us. RMV surcharge, those are when we mark vehicles at the registry for non-payment of parking tickets or excise tax. They get marked. There's $20 fee that we pay, and we don't pay that. The state just takes it out of our cherry sheet aid, and that's the value of that's how many $20 assessments we must have used at the registry. And then lastly is a Merrimack Valley Regional Planning Commission. We're required to contribute $30,000 towards their operating budget. On page 151 is our employee benefits, just in total. And then on page 152 is the detail. The largest items on these employee benefits are pension assessments. The largest are one of the largest ones at 10.6 million. And our group insurance commission is 15 million. Those are the largest items. And then there's unemployment, Medicare, dental, group life, and non-contributory pension. In addition, we also have down below under other uses, we have uncompensated absence reserve, the workers' comp reserve, and the reserve for ILD, which is injured in line of duty. And what that is we've been doing this for the last several years. As you can see, the uncompensated absence reserve is for employees who retire that have a buyout of their sick and vacation time. We used to have each department put it in their operating budgets. We took it out of their operating budgets and put it back here, so that kind of relieve their budgets of that requirement. And every year we put a line item in the operating budget, and we also put we have a free cash transfer of 100,000 that we also add to those reserves, hoping to build up a reserve. Seems like every year we seem to be spending almost as much as we put in. So we're trying to build it up, but it's going to take us a few years because the workers' comp and the ILD, just those are unpredictable. Generally, what we pay out of those two line items are all the medical bills. For the workers' comp reserve, we also do have a few employees or former employees that receive biweekly benefits, the same as payroll employees, and that's what comes out of that line item. Next, under my budget, we also put in the on page 153 and 154 is risk management, and that's the property and auto insurance for city buildings and auto insurance for all the city properties. So we have budgeted 100,000 and 450,000 respectively. The auto insurance is up quite a bit because we've had quite a few vehicles that have been added, or new vehicles that have been added. DPW has added quite a few, and the fire department has a new ladder truck, which also, I believe, affected our premiums. And in the other financing sources and uses on page 155, is more detailed on page 156. And on the first is transfer to other funds. That's 550,000, which I mentioned earlier, goes to that's going to go to the parking garage and lots enterprise fund. That's basically to subsidize their operation. They're supposed to be a self-supporting operation, but with the museum square garage down, that's not possible. So last year and this year, we've had to subsidize their enterprise operation. Next in this line item is a transfer to capital projects. It's $1,188,045, and that's the 1.5% of our prior tax levy that we're required to set aside per our Chapter 58 bailout legislation, and we have to set that aside for pay-go projects. So we'll be that's the required amount to appropriate. We'll be back down to the council, when usually in July with a plan on how to spend that $1,188,000, and we'll need your approval to do so. And then contingency reserve account is $200,000 for the unions that have not settled. We only have a couple of them, the foreman's union, the supervisors and administrators union. So that's an estimated amount that we probably will need to settle those outstanding collective bargaining contracts. And finally, there's a fiscal stability fund payment of $92,000. That's a requirement of the basically bailout legislation from 1990. We are required to set aside 1.5% of our tax levy, or our total tax recap, if you will, amount to be raised on the prior year tax recap, and we have to make sure that amount is at that 1.5% level. That amount is roughly $4.3 million, and this is just the incremental increase, changing it from last year to this year. So every year last year we had to add $240,000. The year before was $123,000, and this year it's only $92,000. And that concludes the CAFO division and all the other parts thereof.
Thank you, Mr. Ainel. At this time, I've asked my questions as I went. I would turn it over to colleagues if they have questions of Mr. Ainello, or I would note that he's joined tonight by several individuals, leaders of our various departments, if you have questions of Mr. Ainello or his team. Mr. Rodriguez. You are on mute, Mr. Rodriguez.
Go past 10.
There's a motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Halloran, if you would take a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilor Payano,
Yes.
Councilor Anna Levy,
Yes.
and Chairman David Abdul.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion pass.
Motion passes 4-0. Mr. Rodriguez, I believe you had the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On the page 156, the contingency reserve account, that you mentioned that was for, Mike, you mentioned that was for the unions, probably contract coming up.
Yes.
Last year, we have several contracts that we settle, but through May 11, you used $0 on that account, and now I see the mayor that got that line item of the budget for about $1.2 million. So what was that? I mean, is that account was not used? We use free cash. How? I mean, I remember using free cash for some of the contracts.
Yeah, last year we had 1.3 million because that represented the estimated amount of outstanding collective bargaining payments that we had out, or collective bargaining agreements that were not settled. This year, they settled last year. So this year we only, like I said, we only had two smaller unions that are outstanding, and 200,000 is all we're going to need to settle those. The rest of the collective bargaining increases are within everybody's operating budget. So all the positions reflect the increase in salaries attributable. Police and fire, for example, you'll notice their payments are all increased because it includes several years worth of collective bargaining agreements.
And the question is, why we didn't use this line item to do the main reason of the reserve? I mean, which is basically to pay the.
Oh, we did use that line item. It's not reflected in the May 11th column in this line item because we actually transferred that was part of the when the collective bargaining agreements are settled, we went down to the council and had you approve those settlements, and we also had you include we also included transfers from this reserve account to the police operating budget, the fire operating budget, and so forth. So that's where the expense is in those budgeted departments, not here in this reserve line item.
Okay. Another thing that I have questions, that was the same question that I asked last year. And obviously the mayor, this year mayor, I guess he got the point because he cut the line item of the group insurance commission by 300,000. And I think that that's on page 152,
Yep.
subsection 5774. And obviously last year we budgeted $15.3 million. The previous year was 14,194,714, but through May 11 we only have 11,045,000. So it sounds like the same question as I asked last year. Sounds like we couldn't have less appropriation on there, since it looked like we're not going to get to the 15 million threshold, knowing the fact that only 11 million was used through May 11, so 2 months worth of top bill is needed to allocate the amount of money needed. So what can we look at the more accurate number and be able to
well, Councilor, I think I explained this last year. Is my recommendation to keep it at 15 million. I did decrease it from the prior year, but I don't feel comfortable dropping it below that because I don't know if you remember health insurance, but health insurance does some years it's 13% increases. There have been double-digit increases to health insurance. Some reason it hasn't happened. I guess being a member of the GIC. We've been lucky and our premiums have gone up less than that. But we do pay about over, as you mentioned, in 19 and 20, we paid 14 million and 14.2 million. This year, we'll probably pay at least 14.5 million. But if we'd had a double-digit increase in that amount, and it's not part of our base budget, we'd be in quite a bit of trouble. So, my practice has always been to try and keep these line items or these baseline items, such as health insurance, keep it at a base level so it's built in. So if there is a double-digit increase or is a larger increase than we expect, we'll be covered. But this year, and in my forecast, when I bring the forecast down to the council, you'll see that I do kind of build in. I think I decreased it to a 3.5%, increase in the health insurance premiums. But the GIC recommends 4.5% or 4.2%, I think, for the prior year. And every year we've just been, I don't know if it's some of our employees, choosing less expensive plans, and we've been able to ride these amounts out. But I still like to keep in the general, 15 million is a lot of money. But if we budgeted 13.5 million or 14 million, and all of a sudden the number came to 15 million, we'd have to come up with $1 million, and that would be quite difficult. So by keeping the base budget, 15 million in the base budget, at least we're assured of, if there is a double-digit increase, we've got most, maybe not all of it covered, but we got a good chunk of it covered. If we kept the margin exactly the same as the prior year with no increase, that would just not be, would not be my recommendation.
I understand. Do you mind sending us the expected bill that is coming up to cover the fiscal year 2021?
Yeah, we'll have the, I'm not sure if there's May and June due, but certainly there's at least 1 month. Usually our bill runs about 3 million, so it's probably about 3.5 million. So it's probably 1 month. We probably have 11 months represented in this May 11 bill or May 11 number.
And I just want to bring this up as a part, as an informational part. I mean, the GIC is not like the private insurance because it's mostly working with the state, and for them to increase that amount is not as easy. I remember that 2 years ago they actually tried to increase the rate, and they were not able to. So
I think what happens with the GIC, they pull their purchasing power and they change the plans, and they'll increase employees' deductibles and things like that to kind of save a few bucks. So we do benefit from that cost saving strategy, but at some point, health insurance is one of those scary line items, historically anyway, to many operating budgets. And I think the city's in a good position. We've been keeping the number a reasonable number, so we've never had an instance where we've had to come up with some money. But for those in the council, those who were on the council in 2010, one of the reasons we borrowed $27.4 million was the health insurance was underfunded by about $4 million. So we're still paying for that payback now. We'll be paying that for another 10 years or so, but we've been repaying that $4 million error over the last 9 years or 10 years. 9 years, I guess. We have 11 years to go.
All right, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Are there other questions? All right. With that, I believe that has completed the agenda items for this evening. Are there any other items from tonight's agenda item anyone wants to go back to? Is there any further comments, questions regarding the agenda items or of the people assembled here from the administration? Hearing none, at this time, I would thank everyone here from the administration that supported the committee this evening by presenting your budget proposals and answering our questions. And I suppose at this time I would entertain a motion to recess until 7 p.m. next Thursday evening, June 3rd.
Moved.
Second.
There is a motion by Councilor Payano to recess until 7 p.m. on June 3rd. It was properly seconded by Councilor Rodriguez. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Halloran, please take a roll call vote.
Councilor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilor Payano,
Yes.
Councilor Levy,
Yes.
and Chairman David Abdu.
Abdu votes yes. That's a 4-0. We are recessed until 7 p.m. on June 3rd. I want to thank everyone this evening for joining us. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.